Okay, we're going to do something a little different tonight. If everybody could please stand, we'll have a moment of silence to remember our friend and colleague, Bam Lafarge, who passed away this week. Thanks, everybody. I just want to say how much I appreciate Bam's service on the CONCOM and other commissions. He was our representative on the Community Preservation Committee, and I know he served on the, was it the Harbor Management?
Harbor Work Group and the Harbor Implementation Plan.
As well as the Article 68 Fertilizer Control Commission. And Shad. He was very active in our community, and I'm sure he's missed by many people. Thank you. Okay, and with that, just our normal reminders to please turn off cell phones and please take extra conversations out into the hall. So we'll start with the public meeting, public comment. Anything from the public on matters that won't be heard tonight? Okay, see now we'll go to the public hearing notices of intent. And let's see, Duke 57 LLC, 55 Duke Road, Lot 16 is continued to the 18th. The Land Bank on 17 and 19 North Liberty Street and 8 Wesco Place is continued to March 1st. And the rest of them are up. So that takes us to Squam Partners LLC at 89 Squam Road.
Mr. Chairman, Al Gasparo for the applicant. I'd like to request a continuance to the next meeting for Squam Partners LLC, as well as for the next one, APG DRS Realty Trust. We'll sign off on number 4 from National Heritage Area and discussions with them.
And to which date?
The 18th?
To the 18th, please.
Okay, unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue Squam Partners LLC and APG DRS Realty Trust until March 18th.
Thank you.
Thanks, Art. Okay. So that takes us to the Land Bank and Conservation Foundation on Pulpus Road.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackman Associates, along with Rachel Freeman of the Land Bank and Karen Beatty of NCF. This is the second public hearing on this application for improvements, land pedestrian access at Norwood Farm. I'll be brief. We will need to continue to address some additional comments from DEP. But we did submit additional information. Karen did to the commission photographs of the crossing. So I thought that it would be best just to briefly touch on that information and to go over that with the commission in case there was anything else that you were looking for. DEP had some comments about, again, centering on the culvert and looking at that. So I wasn't able to get out there last week to address that, but the issues with the photos, I mean, just to review the information that's been submitted. I'm not sure if it was in your packet, but the photos.
Yeah, the photos
are there. Okay, so really it's just to go, that's really what you would ask. I think the only information you had really asked for at the last meeting, and Karen really put together a comprehensive overall map of where the crossings are and the conditions of those crossings. So it's our hope that that would go to satisfy any outstanding concerns that you have, and then I'll work over the course of this next week get out there and provide any additional information that we may be able to, for DEP, and submit that to you as well.
Was there a question about crossing number 5?
Yeah, number 5, that's correct.
The wettest one, basically, yeah.
That wasn't from DEP, that question was only from you. Their question revolved around the culvert, where the box culvert's gonna go.
Okay.
And whether or not that's a stream that's between there or not. And that's just gonna take a little bit more work.
And this one for wetland crossing 5, that's the one where you are going to put a little culvert in?
No, number 5 is only a temporary mat.
Okay.
So that would only be, the only purpose of that, right now there's a little footbridge that's there, sort of like, again, pedestrian only, but on a, periodic basis, this upper upland area needs to be mowed. And it's just to get a tractor up there to do the mowing per the management plan, and then back out, and then pull the mats back up again. While you have a fairly wide wetland crossing there, the ditch that runs through there is only a few feet wide. And it's just so that we can span that area without impact. Again, it'd be a rubber tired tractor that comes and goes on. I think it's once a year for up in there.
It's
Not even every other, so it's just as part of the successional mowing regime for the area.
Is that a temporary stream and it just happens to be full in this picture, or is that permanent?
Yeah, it's,
Wow.
yeah,
How missed that all this?
yeah, it's a pretty neat little spot. Yeah.
It's flowing right now.
I'll bet.
So.
The pictures really help.
We'd be happy to, Karen really did a great job with them. If there are any other information or questions, we would work on those for the next meeting, and if not, after you hear from the public, if there's anything, we'd be happy to continue to the 18th.
The commission have anything for Art? More requests for information, or?
These are great.
No, I don't think we need to beat this thing around any
No.
whole lot more.
Anything from the public on the land bank and foundation out at Norwood Farm? Okay, well, then Art, you want to continue to the 18th on this?
Please.
So unless there's an objection, we'll continue this to the 18th.
Thank you.
Thanks, Art. Okay, the Cylon LLC at 286 Pulpus Road.
Once again, for the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackwell Associates, this is the second public hearing on this application, and there had been a couple of questions. We were waiting for a file number, and then there was also a couple questions about the lawn and the extent of the lawn. And what I did was to submit a historic aerial photograph that showed the same lawn configuration in 1971, prior to the enactment of the regulations, and then one from, I think, 1998, 2005, or 2012, in an effort to demonstrate that it's been maintained consistently for that amount of time, and it is what we would consider to be a grandfathered use. At the same time, recognizing that there's also, we have proposed to use fertilizer on the site in accordance with the best management practices, but recognizing that having the lawn and no vegetated buffer directly to the wetland could be of additional concern. I have discussed with the applicants, the owners, whether they would be amenable to a condition where there would be no fertilizer use up to between 0 and 50 even. And in an effort, they would like to keep the grandfathered lawn because they think it gives really nice views of the area, but they're happy to not have that be a fertilized sort of perfect lawn, if you will. It's more of sort of native, natural kind of a mowed area. And so we would be amenable to that additional condition of no fertilizer use between 0 and 50, as well as having provided the information for the historic aerial photographs. Again, a recap of the project is removal of quite a few structures within 0 to 50, relocation of one of the front structure, and then a bit of construction that occurs outside of your buffer zone and then outside of the 50-foot buffer zone for a pool and the new structure. A major part of this application is taking old cesspools that are right on the wetland boundary and putting in a new IA septic system with a Phragmite pressure distribution system, providing a 5-foot separation to groundwater outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So I believe there's a clear net benefit to the overall project through removal of structures, improvements to the septic system, and with that, I'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you may have.
Are there any more questions for Art on this project?
Nope.
Anything from the public on the Cylon Elves, 286 Pulpus Road? Okay. Well, Art, you ready to close?
Yeah.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close the hearing?
Sir?
We have that motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Art. Okay, Bennett, 22 Lily Street.
Just Mr. Chairman, we just went to the file number on this one?
Right.
From last time? This was the raised porch addition.
For the applicant, Architect Sparrow, I don't want to take too much of your time unless you have additional questions. This was for the porch, about 44 feet away from the resource area boundary within an existing lawn area. And I believe that we only continued for a file number. I know there was some discussion in the waivers based on no reasonable alternative and no adverse impact. Again, this is the one suspended on posts. So essentially, we're putting in, 3 sonotubes within an existing lawn area so that they can have a porch that overlooks this area.
Any questions for Art? Okay, anything from the public on Bennett at 22 Lily Street? Okay, so you ready to close, Art?
Yes.
Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
Yes, sir.
I have a motion to close the hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, then we go to McCarthy Nantucket House LLC at 12 Conference Street.
Mr. Chairman, I believe this was also a file number.
Yes.
Continue for the file number. Briefly go back over the project. I don't think there was any information that you had requested from me at the last hearing. This is for the project down on Coffin Street behind the town pier. Residential redevelopment within the flood zone, lifting the structures up to comply with building code within the flood zone. There's a new structure proposed, relocating. I think as far as the interests or greatest concern for the commission was this cottage near the southerly property line, which is being picked up and moved to conform with the zoning setback and is partially located within the 50-foot setback. There's 2 vegetated wetlands, and we've kind of balanced between them. The new structural elements include stairs to access the structure at the elevated level, and I think the only piece of question last time was about that deck within the 50, but I think if you look, we've sort of balanced the area from, as we've moved away, we moved further away from this wetland, and we already had that area, so it's really a sort of a net wash, if you will, for a structural area within the 50-foot buffer zone. And they're just hoping to have a small elevated area, which is the reason for the deck, because of, as you well know, the area floods.
Any questions for Art?
I mean, I guess I don't think this is necessarily in our purview, but adding so much more building space, and I know it ends up being, what, like 1,500 square feet or something with the add-on and the garage.
Yep.
Just on a site that's so wet concerns me. It's just for long-term management of downtown, property management. I don't know what they're going to do with the extra water from roof runoff on that site.
I think that, if I may, the same, it's sort of like every building that goes on in Brant Point too. You know, what are you going to say? You know, there is flood zone, but by not the performance or the interest is to not impact the ability of the land to contain floodwaters. So in effect, I think you're actually improving the situation by taking these up and putting in piers to let that water equalize underneath. Now, I completely agree with respect to creating additional impervious area as potential, concern. I think though, when you look at the overall site and the overall area, that 1,500 square feet is a fairly small amount of area, and that the flooding that really happens is not a result of such a small. Unless you're going to now say sort of all through the flood zone, there's no new impervious area. I don't see how you, and exactly balance that out. So I would hope that, if we're going to continue to allow some pieces of development in this area combined with the improvements that come with picking them up to allow the floodwaters, that's probably what goes to really protecting the interest or meeting the interest protected by the commission, the ability of the land to contain the water.
Anything else from the commission? Anything from the public on the McCarthy Nantucket House on Coffin Street? Okay. Well, Jeff, we have everything we need to close the hearing.
Yes.
You ready to close, Art?
I am.
We have a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, Daisy Field Press, 78 Nantucket Road, Lot 2. Lot 4 is first.
Good afternoon, Mark Rich from Site Design Engineering, representing the applicants at 78 Nantucket Road. I have two in a row for two separate lots on this property. So there's one thing I'd like to say that concerns both of them first. We have been in discussion with Natural Heritage about this property for over a year and a half now. We're working on determining what they're considering habitat and what they want to do in terms of putting together a conservation management plan, et cetera, for the property. So we haven't actually received a formal response from them yet on these two NOIs, but just wanted to let you guys know that we are well into the process with them and have been for some time. That said, on to Lot 4. You guys saw this property fairly recently. We did an RDA confirming an updated wetland line on this property. It had been previously flagged by a number of people. The latest iteration was by Brian Madden, and we had some ongoing mowing and maintenance of a meadow area fairly close to the wetland line, which was permitted under the recent RDA. What we are coming before you with tonight is a proposed residential development. All structural components are outside of the 50. Septic system is outside of the 100. No waivers are required as far as I understand. There's a little bit of landscaping and grading inside the 50, but we are keeping 50% of the 25 to 50 as the existing meadow, which is the habitat that Heritage wants us to keep on the site because it's some forage habitat. Our closest point to a wetland actually happens here at the driveway. There's a wetland on the opposite side of Nantucket Road. We're just outside the 25-foot buffer, which encompasses most of Nantucket Road, and we're doing a pervious driveway, so that's all outside of 25 as well. Beyond that, I'll be happy to answer any questions the commission may have on this one.
Any questions for Mark? Okay, anything from the public on Daisy Field Lot 4? Wow. Okay. You ready to close it, Mark?
I believe we have to wait.
We have to wait for our
Heritage.
Heritage.
Okay, so would you like to continue?
I'd like to continue, and
2 weeks?
2 weeks, and if there are no issues, hopefully we'll be able to close this out easily next time.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I guess you're staying up there, huh?
For lot 2.
And now we go to Lot 2, Daisy
Now
Field.
we go to Lot 2. Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at Lot 2, 78 Nantucket Road. Fairly similar project to what I've just presented for Lot 4. We have the established wetland line. We're proposing, again, a residential development. All structural components are outside the 50. Septic system is outside the 100. 50% of the 25 to 50 will be kept as meadow, as well as the rest of the meadow area. A little bit of grading inside the 50 back here. Other than that, that's pretty much it. We have a similar situation with the driveway on Nantucket Road, but again, that's outside the 25, and it's pervious here. And that's pretty much it on this one.
You're waiting for Heritage to come?
We are
in
also
on this?
waiting for Heritage on this one, and we haven't gotten a file number yet on this.
Any questions from Mark on Lot
2.
Anything from the public on Daisy Field Lot 2? Okay, so Mark, would you like to continue to the 18th?
Yes, please.
Okay.
For both of us, I'm pretty safe to grant.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Norton, 24 North Cambridge Street.
Really quick at the start of this one, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Our minutes taker lives at this property. She just wanted to disclose that she resides there.
I am a part owner and live at the property. If anyone has problems with me taking the minutes, I will step away.
Anybody have an issue? We'll check those minutes really carefully. There's always the audio and visual recordings. And I did forget to mention at the beginning of the meeting, we are recording this meeting, and anybody else that makes any record of this is required to tell us any audio or visual record. Sorry, I got lost in band there. Okay.
Don Brackett from Brackett Engineering with the applicant, Valerie Norton. Brian Madden filed a notice of intent, so I'm going to handle the solo. He couldn't make it over today. So the project consists of constructing 2 additions to an existing single-family dwelling. Part of the addition is going to go to an additional bedroom, so that had triggered an upgrade of the existing septic system. The property is almost entirely located within the 100-year flood zone, except for the area of the existing non-septic system. The other associated wetland resource areas are bordering vegetated wetland areas that Brian had flagged recently a few months ago. There was a file from 2007 for this property that had wetland delineations on it as well. These new wetland delineations are a little closer than the 2007 file, so it's most accurate and latest wetland line that you're seeing on this plan. We did go to the Board of Health and got a sort of a preliminary variance for the septic system. Automatically, you have to have a 50-foot setback to a leaching system. We asked for a variance down to 10 feet, one, because there's town water available now. There wasn't at the time when it was originally constructed. And 2, we're proposing a better treatment for the effluent. We're proposing a geoflow pressure distribution drip irrigation drip system. So with those 2 factors, Board of Health has told us they're going to approve the plan. We also determined the groundwater direction. If you look closely at the plan, we installed 3 groundwater monitoring wells, which show that the groundwater flow is sort of north across the property from Little Neck Way, heading toward the isolated, the border vegetated wetland on the other side. The groundwater that we found when we put the monitoring wells, it was around elevation 0.7. The groundwater that was indicated is 2.7. When we did the monitoring wells, it was probably the tides were lower, and so it's obviously fluctuates with the tide. So the reason I point that out is we are asking for a waiver for the 2-foot separation for the pool installation, proposing a 4-foot deep pool with the bottom of the footing at 2.6, which is where the groundwater was found when the test pits were done for the septic system, and those were based on models. So that's the highest we expect it to go. We don't expect to be excavating in the groundwater, but for some reason, because of tides or winds or whatever, the groundwater is higher than that. Brian included something in the notice of intent that any dewatering would be outside the 50-foot buffer in the dirt bag, but as I said, we don't expect any dewatering. The other waiver we're looking for is for a small corner of the addition off the back of the house, which is 0.7 square feet. The corner of the addition will be 49.4 feet from the BVW, as opposed to 50 feet. To help offset or mitigate for that waiver request, there's an existing shed that's going to be removed. That a portion of that is within the 50-foot, and the entire portion is within 100-foot. We're also relocating the driveway. Right now it comes off of Little Neck Way. Portion of it is within 50 feet of the BVW across the way. The new driveway will be completely out of the 50-foot buffer zone from both wetland areas. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Tom?
But this was for the health department, the preferred septic design, not something like a tight tank or...
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we meet the size of the lot, we meet all the nitrogen loading calculations. The system already has a septic tank, so it's already treating nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the distribution.
Going to Phragmites or something.
Correct. When I met with Richard Ray, he said in order to get the variance, you've got to use anything you can, state of the art, to maximize the treatment. And this treatment is much better than the standard system where it spreads everything out over the entire area rather than in one location.
Okay.
And then do we have a plan in our packet that shows where the new construction, where the new addition is?
I've highlighted it.
I'm not seeing it.
On page 275.
I'm looking at page 275. I'm seeing the shed.
Shrink it down.
Shrink it down. Over here.
Yeah.
On the lot that is really being applied for that we should be looking at. Thank you.
May I add something?
This was opening up in one corner.
The has approved the addition, so we won't be changing
I'm
the
looking at
layout of the plan
That's
at all.
fine.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything from the public on Norton, on 24 North Cambridge? See not. Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
Amazingly, we did.
Don, would you like to close?
We would like to close.
I have a motion to close.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries.
Got technology
Thank you.
cranking now.
Okay, Town of Nantucket on 15 Harbor View Way. This, I believe, is the dock at Children's Beach, isn't it?
Okay.
So move this forward, Mackenzie.
And I know.
I'll get it.
Good afternoon. My name is David Smith. I'm with GZA Geoenvironmental. I'm here representing the town of Nantucket, the applicant for this project. I'm also here this evening with Sheila Lucy, the Nantucket Harbor Master, and Deputy Chief Charles Gibson with the Nantucket Police Department. The project at 15 Harbor Way is the Children's Beach Boat Ramp Improvement Project. It's an existing boat ramp that was reconstructed in 2004, and it's approximately 30 feet wide and 70 feet long. It's a precast concrete ramp, and it extends out to about -4 mean low water, with the top of the ramp at plus 3.6 mean low water. It has 2 timber piers on either side, on the north side and also the south side of the ramp. And the precast concrete portion is actually surrounded by a timber sheeting wall bulkhead that was used probably to facilitate construction. The existing condition of the ramp, the precast planks are actually in a fairly good condition, being only about 10 or 11 years old. But the issue comes with the ramp is that it's dead low tide. It's not, it becomes a hazard to use with the boats. It's very difficult to be able to get the boats off the trailers because the back of the ramp doesn't go out far enough or deep enough. In addition to that, the piers at dead low tide, if you were able to get the boat off, there's very little room to be able to pull the boat in and dock against the pier to be able to then move your trailer elsewhere and be able to get on and off the boat. So in addition to that, there's a large void at the bottom of the ramp. It's approximately 3 to 5 feet in width, or in length, I guess, and across the whole width of the ramp. And what has happened is the last precast panel has actually shifted a little bit, and there's a huge void underneath there where you have this gully effect between the last slab and the timber bulkhead that's right there. And it was evidence that a lot of trailers in the past have been hung up there before. So this project, we're looking to improve the conditions at the ramp, and what we're proposing is to keep the same basic footprint that's there now, keep the same width as 30 feet, but go out further, which would get us into deeper water. So what we're proposing in order to get this work done is we're looking to have a steel sheet pile cofferdam surround the ramp, surround the proposed work site on 3 sides so that the contractors can do this work in the dry. We're going to take up the existing precast slabs that are, again, in fairly good shape. I think we might need to do some repairs with the connections. They were probably damaged during construction. And stockpile those. The precast slabs are on a crushed stone bed. We're looking to regrade that, add more crushed stone. In the lower portion of the ramp, the actual toe and along the sides, up a certain distance, we're going to actually take out that timber bulkhead that's there. And when that gets taken out, we're going to regrade all that with crushed stone. We're going to reuse those 10 precast planks, add 2 more of the same size so that it goes out further. What I forgot to mention was the existing ramps at a slope where it's about 10.6% slope. And typically boat ramps are in the range of about 12 to 15%. So with this proposed reconstruction of the ramp, we're going to go a little over 12% to make it more steeper, to get out to deeper water quicker and also be able to have the boat safely load and offload without getting into that void. So we're extending the ramp out 12 feet with that slope, and then we're going to have another precast section, a third one, which will be laid flat for scour protection, so that when boats do launch and retrieve at the ramp, they're not power launching and creating a gully effect in that area. With the removal of that lower bulkhead and the extension of the ramp, we want to be able to put scour protection along the sides, the north and south sides of those precast panels. Right now, the slope is such, and the grades out there are such that it's all flat, so the bottom of the ramp is going to be even with the existing grade. But in the event that we have some conditions where the sand lowers in that area for some reason, or maybe there's additional scour or transporting of soil, we want to have some edge protection along there so that if the beach, if the existing grade does lower, that it's at least protected and that bottom section isn't undermined. With the addition of that ramp extension, we are looking to extend the piers as well on both the north and south side, again, to be able to have it so that you can safely, once you launch a boat, to be able to pull up to the pier safely at low tide. I guess with that, in addition, it's my understanding this is the only ramp within the harbor, and it's used quite frequently both throughout the year. Summertime, you have recreational boaters, commercial people use it. In the wintertime, you have your fishermen, shellfish people that use it as well. We're looking to try to get this work done in the off-season, the off-boating season, and realizing that there are still people that would be using this ramp. We're looking to construct a temporary ramp on the beach right next to the existing one while this ramp is being constructed. What we're envisioning is you can either use these heavy-duty mats that would be laid on the beach or a Moby mat system, and that would be just temporarily laid down for when the ramp is being constructed. The timber bulkhead that's further up onto the approach at the end of Harbor View Lane on that south side of that roadway, we'd have to create an opening within that bulkhead to be able to utilize that temporary ramp for access, and then that would be restored afterwards when the project's done. I think that's the project in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
How long do you think it would take?
That was one of my questions.
Probably be about 2 to 3 months duration.
Where do you, can you point out on here where you plan to put the temporary ramp, all that? It sounds like it's over there, but.
Shown with this dashed line right here. It comes along the south side, then it goes across here, and then it comes back here. I believe it comes up to above mean-high water. I think the total footage is about 260 linear feet within this U-shaped
That's
area.
That's the whole.
Coffer
Oh,
dam?
that's the
Yeah,
coffer.
that's the coffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the temporary.
Oh, the temporary is
That's
this.
helpful, though, thank you. I
Yep.
appreciate that.
The temporary would be right here, right along the edge of the beach.
And there's that stormwater treatment outflow, where's that at? Is that close to, no, okay. There's a little treatment thing, so there's nothing there.
That gets piped, that gets piped
This
that way, and then out closer to the outlet. But the pump itself is for the back of this, yep, and this won't interfere with that.
It's back,
Okay.
back in here.
Okay, I'm
Yep.
just trying to figure out what else is here, what I just place that, and, okay.
This would not be any excavation, it's just going to be a surface.
Just
plate.
laying straight
Yep,
out, yeah.
correct.
And there's not, I mean, you guys have to do new shellfish evaluations, or you've got the maps from before?
We have the maps before, and it's such a heavily trafficked area.
Well, there's nothing there, but you have to prove there's nothing
Yep.
there, which you have to prove the first time, so.
No, we actually have pretty good records from even coming down from the Sanford's bulkhead when the White Elephant redid their
Right,
dredging
right.
just a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And then we relooked at this one again when the kind of the planning and stuff came forth this one, so.
I remember for each different ramp, we've had to go through quite a lot of machinations to make sure that,
Nope, I think we're good. I know we've checked and we've been kind of up and down that.
okay.
We've had so many projects up there in the last year.
I figured that was the case, but we'd have to put that in this
No,
file,
absolutely.
so, yeah. Okay, thank you.
How deep do you have to drive those sheet piles for that coffer dam?
That's a good question.
And do you drive them, or are they vibrated in, or how are they?
They're probably going to be vibrated in, being sand. I'm going to leave that up to the contractor for the actual design. I do have another sheet that's back at my desk that listed a profile of the depths on this, and I think generally a rule of thumb is a third up, you'd have 2/3 down into the mud.
Mhm.
I have the length that we'd come up with, I don't know off the top of my head, because it was a staggered effect. We didn't have to have the same size, the same length sheet to go around the whole perimeter. We're going to use
Tall ones back there.
basically taller ones that, correct, out in the deeper water, and then stagger them as you come up.
Because the coffer dam, they don't have to use a silk curtain, right? Or they still need to do
They'll
that?
put the
Probably
silk,
do.
they'll
Probably
need to use
both.
the silk curtain,
Mhm.
for that, and then also for the installation of
The cofferdam.
the cofferdam.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then-
then back out of it.
And then work that
Yeah.
takes place inside the cofferdam. They obviously, they have it up on the outside, they can do work freely inside there. I know the DMF has also passed that concern along to them as part of the project. They
Yeah.
have
So
They have
siltation.
standards for that, the
Yeah.
dewatering of it has to be enclosed.
Yep.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah, you can't
Have you guys
have,
investigated Porter Dam or anything for this? The use
I
of that?
did, I put a call in the Porter Dam, sent them the drawings. They felt that with the exposure and the depths, that they were maxed out on
Yeah,
that.
14 feet is what they're meant
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought too, and I was surprised that he told me that around 10 or 11 feet
for.
is what he would max out for this. So that he, I talked to him at length. but then-
wave, he's worried about wave height overtopping it, or?
Well, we talked about the total water depth, the fact that you have to, embed this, the tide, right, and I think he figured in a 2-foot wave beyond high tide.
Yeah, that's
And it was
probably,
just hovering around the limit that he told me.
well, storm surge and all kinds of.
Which I thought you could actually go up to about 14 feet, but there's other, systems out there besides Porter Dam to do that, but we felt, also, steel sheet pile coffer dam could be done as well.
Sure.
Does Porter Dam just sit on the?
It's on the bed, the ocean, and it has a big curtain. I've used it in many situations for boat ramps, they're ideal for that.
Yeah.
Cameron roads, all the big ones we used to stay. It was 14 feet.
14, yeah.
It worked. It's a calm shoulder arm,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like this one. It's not too bad.
Right.
It just saves a lot of time.
Yeah, it saves a long time, and putting in that sheet steel is pretty disruptive to start.
What are you going to use when you said you wanted to put something along the sides of the ramp to protect it?
Yeah.
What are you putting in there?
Gabions,
Yeah, we had proposed to use stone-filled gabions, mattress. So basically, it's a rectangular cage
showing 3
Mhm.
and 3.
where you fill it with stone, and you can do it you could do it on the flat up further landward and be able to boom that in and set it in with a crane or an excavator.
About a foot wide, or on each side of the ramp? or-
These are going to be, I believe, 6 feet wide, and if you look at the cross-section on sheet,
These are pretty big. You'd have to assemble these in place.
I would think so,
Experience, we
too.
wouldn't be able to pick them 6 feet wide.
if you look at figure 4, we were figuring around 6 feet, and then along the length of where the new planks would go. This is rated existing grade, so basically what we're proposing is to have them excavate this out, place in the gabion mattresses, and then backfill back up, so they'd be basically buried. But in the event that in the future, this existing grade line comes down to here, at least the ramp would be protected. It's gonna go 3 feet deep at an angle.
Any other questions?
The temporary ramp, could you explain that one a little bit?
Yeah, well, we could, there's a couple different options that you could use. Obviously, we need to create an opening to be able to get the trailer down there off the road, the access
Yeah.
way in. And then the ramp could either be a Moby mat, which is, I don't know how to describe it, I wish I brought a sample.
It's
but
the mat that is at Jetty's Beach,
Okay.
the little
Oh.
white one that's really
Yep.
wavy, that's a
Yep.
Moby mat.
Oh, cool.
It's just a larger scale version.
You're able to drive on it.
Right.
Or what we recently used in a project, a beach nourishment project, to gain access on the beach was these real heavy-duty HDPE panels that interlocked,
Mm-hmm.
and you could actually drive tractor trailers right on it.
Oh, I
Those
see.
worked out pretty slick. They come in sections, you interlock them right in.
Oh, just pull them right back up.
Yeah. So we didn't specify exactly which method.
Right,
It's,
the contractor, right.
The
certain-
concept.
The
Yeah.
concept is there, yeah.
Great.
It's not gonna be, like I said, we're not gonna excavate, we're just gonna lay it right on the surface.
And how far out in the water will that go?
We had showed it going to mean low water, but I believe that's a mistake. We want to take it a little bit further out to allow the boats to be able to use this, not just at high tide. So it'd probably go out to like -2. We'd have to be able to anchor it. If it's a Moby mat, we'd have to anchor it in place. It's these HDP sections, I believe. they're heavy enough, they should be able to lay right on the bottom.
Yeah, you don't want trails getting hung up on the end of that.
Right.
Anything else? Anything from the public on the Town of Nantucket Children's Beach Pier? Okay. Do we have a concern that in effect then the plan is wrong if it doesn't show the mat going to the proper depth, or is that something?
That's
could
something
just
we can condition.
Condition, okay.
The activity's there. I think if we say that the temporary ramp can be extended to, -2, elevation -2 as part of a condition, that we'd be okay.
Does this change like Chapter 91? Are you waiting for DEP for comments, or?
I think we're all square for them. Chapter 91 is a separate issue for this, and they'll have to complete permitting through all of those things separately, but one of the requirements to file with Chapter 91 is a final order of conditions.
Yep.
So,
Let's not wait for other agencies and
I'm
then
not saying that,
know
no.
what they say. Yeah.
We will be filing a new Chapter 91 license for this, and then also with the Army Corps as well.
Okay, so do we have everything we need to close, Jeff?
we do.
Would you like to close the hearing? I have a motion to close. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Good. Now we go to Town of Nantucket, 34 Washington Street. This is the town pier.
For the record, David Smith from GZA Geoenvironmental, representing the Town of Nantucket for proposed storm damage repairs at the town pier at 34 Washington Street. Again, I'm here this evening with Sheila Lucy, who's the Nantucket Harbor Master, and Deputy Chief Charles Gibson from the Nantucket Police Department. The existing town pier is comprised of the main pier is 8 feet wide, over 810 feet long. It has timber finger piers that are off on the north side of the main pier, with 4 what we're calling catwalk piers off of each of the fingers. At the far eastern end of the pier, the seaward end, is what we're calling a breakwater pier, which is in a kind of an odd angular shape here. And off of the breakwater pier, you have 3 catwalk piers that exist on the west side of the main pier. The breakwater pier in front of it has a steel pile, steel frame breakwater system that is independent from the pier itself, and that was constructed at some time after the main pier. The main pier was built in the late 1970s. The date escapes me on the breakwater pier. But that breakwater pier also has a wave screen, timber wave screen in front of it, along with timber piles where boats can actually pull up on the outside face. On the south side of the main pier, you have a timber platform that's over near the shoreline with a ramp system that leads down to a timber gangway, aluminum gangway, and then it leads out to a system of timber floats, 8-foot wide main floats, and then 3-foot wide fingers that extend off of that. So we got brought in about a year and a half or so to look at the conditions of the town pier. We had created an inspection report for the town. And we've been working on another separate project on the town floats to improve those, which will be coming before the commission at a later date. But most recently, in the blizzard of 2015, is the big one we had here, January 26th and 27th, the pier sustained substantial damage. There was quite a bit of damage on the breakwater pier. And you can see in this highlighted copy, and I think on your copies that you have, it's shaded in gray. But these are the sections that basically have been totally destroyed. The hatch sections that we show on here in gray also represent members of the pier that needs to be replaced. So at that time during the storm, we were astronomically high tide. We had storm surge, and the waves and the water were basically inundated the whole system. destroyed most of the Breakwater Pier, most of the decking is gone, the framing's gone, and the piles, and the whole system up there has been wrecked. There's various sections along the main pier where the decking has actually come up and the framing is actually pulled up and broken away from their pile supports, pile caps. Same thing with the catwalk piers and also the finger piers. In addition to the damage on these, we had some damage out on the platform area that leads down to the timber floats. That portion of that structure, the railing got destroyed, and also some uplift occurred on the connections to from the stringers to the pile caps. The timber floats, there was 3 sections that are basically totally destroyed and broken in half, and the finger float is actually missing. That got, we actually believe that's been found, but it's destroyed. So what we're looking to do is to basically put back what is there now and get this pier back into an operating condition before the storm. It's going to involve reconstruction of the Breakwater Pier, which includes removal and replacement of the timber piles, pile caps, stringers, and decking. In addition to that, there's sections on the main pier and also the finger piers that are going to be totally rebuilt with just the framing, pile caps, stringers, and then also the decking. The entire facility is going to have new bracing put on. And the floats, we're looking to replace the 3 damaged main timber floats and also the finger float that is missing. And I think that's about it in a nutshell.
Any questions?
So anything you can do to strengthen it? Or I don't think that there is necessarily, but to prevent this from happening in the future, or this is pretty strong design to begin with?
Well, it's an old pier. As I said, it goes back to the 70s. When we looked at the pier initially a year and a half ago, we found some deficiencies, some areas that needed improvement. After the storm event, we realized what we had kind of proposed back then was right, that we, things needed to get done. We're basically putting the pier, the structure back to where it was, with the exception of the connections. And what we're looking to do is, one of the main reasons why these sections have actually lifted up and pulled away is you have the timber piles, you have pile caps, and you have stringers that sit on the pile caps. And they were put in with drift pins. And what has happened is with the waves and the energy and the high water, basically lifted it right up. So we're going to improve that connection and put galvanized hurricane ties that are able to connect the stringer to the pile cap, and that's going to be the improved connections. Also, the decking will be, we're going to use stainless steel screws to be able to connect the decking.
Yeah, there's a lot
So there's
of
going to be a
rest on
little
the
bit of
system.
improvements to this, but for the most part, we're basically putting back what was there.
So it's mostly a replacement in kind.
It's a replacement in kind, that's correct.
You know, when I was going through it, there's no new area or no expansion or no real increase in. I mean, I think from our review standpoint, the major effectors here are probably the piles themselves. There's no increase in number in the piles, it's just a replace. And I think the page that was helpful for me is 343 in your packet. There's a real clear breakdown of exactly how many piles in which section that he was just talking about for main pier, for stringers, and it gives a really detailed breakdown of how many board feet we're looking at and just how many pieces. That I thought was really helpful, but
Yeah, that is helpful.
I think it made it very clear when going through and seeing that there's no additional piers going on, no additional pilings. It's literally replacing for replacing. I mean, I think in a lot of applications we see maintenance and repair, especially for things like this, get covered by the maintenance and repair division. This was just that there was so much, and then especially at the breakwater end, that there was so much going on and such a significant replacement that that's kind of what triggered the filing. I think if you took off the very end section and we're just dealing with the floats and a few other things, really fairly basic maintenance would probably be covered by our regulations already. So.
Yeah, to remove that, that's going to be, I mean, as far as vibrating that out or bringing in the barge with 3 cranes and
One frame.
one crane? It's not, you don't have to have one on either end at the same time.
Well, they might want to facilitate that for the time.
Yeah.
Project.
There's also something too that through DMF again and then through DEP, there are standards for siltation curtains to be in place and specific, piling siltation measures to be in place when they
This is a more
take out
critical area,
and
yeah.
put in
Yeah.
to do those things. So that's something that I know is a concern of both those and something that falls into our purview as well, to be sure that things are properly curtained off and kind of cordoned off for the area and let you settle before you move on.
Do we have an up-to-date map of the Nantucket area here too?
Yes.
Okay.
This is another area that I know we just did
Pretty
in the last
recently.
year and a half.
And it's okay? I mean,
So do we have everything we need for this thing? Are we looking
Yes,
for
there's
reasons?
not a lot of, there's no existing habitat really underneath it, and there's no real shellfish, just such a heavily trafficked area,
Mm.
nothing really sets up.
No, I figured that's, but we just
Yeah,
have to
most
prove
of the,
that.
most of the eelgrass and stuff that we have that's in that area is all eelgrass that gets loaded in from storms. It's primarily dead or rack. And then most of the shellfish that land in that area, we've seen, I know the last time we were looking at them a year or so ago, end up in piles because they're shellfish that come off someone's boat or something they get dumped in. They're not really native shellfish, so they're native shellfish, but they're not
Local.
local. They were picked up somewhere else and discarded or dropped off or too small, so not a lot of native shellfish.
Anything from the public on the town of Nantucket, the pier replacement project? Seeing not, then if there's anything else from the commission, we're ready to close the hearing.
To make a motion to close the hearing, Mr. Chairman?
Second motion.
You are ready to close, sir?
Yes.
And Jeff, you're ready to close?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we go to the Nantucket Pond Coalition, Hummock Pond Project.
We haven't been able to hang anybody yet tonight.
What's up?
Yep.
I'm Ken Wagner, Water Resource Services, representing the Nantucket Pond Coalition. The proposal is to mechanically harvest up to 20 acres in the south basin of Hummock Pond. This is a roughly 90-acre area in which up to 20 acres would be harvested in any given year. Probably in the first year it would really be about 10. You could sort of treat it as a demonstration project. If they like how it goes, they may expand the program a bit and may even buy their own harvester in future years. This area has very dense native vegetation. Interesting ecology of the pond because of the bleaching and the saltwater fluctuations. Only seed-producing annuals survive because you wouldn't be able to tolerate the salinity for freshwater plants during parts of the year. So these are all essentially annual plants. In some cases, by harvesting intensively, extensively, and repeatedly, we've shifted plant communities. But since we're talking about less than 12% of the area of the pond, and these are seed-producing things, we're really not going to change much in terms of the seed bank. The one oddity in this is that we are not saying exactly where we're going to harvest at this point because we don't know. The pattern can be different every year because of the seed producers and the distribution of the seeds. If it's not all that bad, and given the kind of winter we're having, maybe it won't be a bad year, they won't even need to do it. If it's very, very dense, like it certainly was last summer, and I understand the summer before that, it would be necessary to cut some lanes just so people can vote back and forth. It would actually also improve habitat. Both of those things are covered. Interestingly enough, today marked 30 days for Natural Heritage to have the notice of intent, and in fact at 3:57 I got an email from them. So I don't have anything to hand you, but they have said this project is exempt in their mind because it represents improvement of endangered species habitat. So they're fine with it.
What endangered species?
There are state-listed species, 3 plants around the periphery. Because of the way Natural Heritage draws their maps, they cover the whole lake. But the reality is those plants are not and could not be outdoor harvesting. The condition that I proposed was that we not harvest in less than 3 foot of water, and they're fine with that. They said the plants they're worried about don't grow in more than 1 foot of water.
But did they give you a list of those?
They did.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, they listed. One of them's pygmy something, and then there's a water panning, hydrocateli, and I've forgotten the third one. I knew about the water panning, I didn't know about the other 2. But they did list the 3 species, said they were all peripheral. Again, just the way they draw their maps, where they find something or believe there's something, they can draw a line a certain distance away from it. I believe for aquatic plants it's 900 feet. So it just goes across the lake from both sides. And you wind up having to apply for it. Interestingly enough, again, I only read it briefly. I need to talk to Emily Holt, who's the managing person there. She says that because it's exempt, they're returning the filing fee. And I'm at a loss because if we're working in an area where the plants don't exist, how can we be improving habitat for them?
That's my next
I
question, is why would you call this
I
improving?
don't know. So, I mean, I'm grateful, but I don't quite understand.
And not doing their job again?
So it's pretty straightforward. Again, it's just a matter of about a month prior to it, we do a survey, we supply a map saying, okay, here's where we propose to cut. It would be GPS coordinates. The harvesters go out with GPSs on them and they just follow the path. Pretty straightforward. They would put in from the Bartlett land, which is roughly the middle of the pond, just below the narrows on the side. And that would also be where plants were offloaded. They will be spread initially on the Bartlett property there to dry. It's not clear whether they will remain there or move on, but they will be outside of any resource area. This work would probably take place in late July or early August. So you could expect that late June or early July you would see a map saying here's where we want to work.
Reason for the timing, for that time? Why would you do it at that time?
You want to get it before too many of the seeds are dropped if you can, although frankly it's not going to make a lot of difference to the seed bank. And they're saying they want to do it after the plants have increased to the point where there is possibly a nuisance condition, but not obviously the end of the summer where they can't really use it. There was considerable discussion within the group about exactly when that time should be, and much like the map, I can't really say for sure, but generally speaking, they do not experience problems through about the middle of July.
As far as, so this is being done strictly for navigation?
Well, that's certainly what the impetus for it is. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, it also does represent habitat improvement. Were it not interfering with recreation and such, I'm sure nobody would be doing it, yes.
Talked to a couple of pond experts, and one of their concerns about harvesting is bycatch, basically, and
Correct.
training turtles and fish and things that can't get out of the way depending on how fast the harvester is moving.
Yeah. It doesn't move very fast, but small fish will stay around the plant, and they do indeed get picked up. I can say that I have seen a turtle occasionally come up, but that's not a problem because they just get dumped and they go right back in the water. Oftentimes they'll actually stop and put them all. The good harvesters will actually stop when they see something cut and just freeze, stop the conveyor, and the things just swim away. For any big fish, they do the same thing. For the many, many small fish that could come up on there, and I don't mean many come up at a time, but the probability is there will be small fish.
Sure.
It's correct, they generally ignore it. And again, if the fish are that dense in and around those plants, that actually represents improvement in fishery, and nobody talks in those terms.
That pond is full of very tiny fish.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And actually, opening this up will make for much better fishery considerations in terms of the sit-and-wait type predators being able to pick them off in the lane. It's a pretty standard fishery management technique. It isn't practiced very much in Massachusetts. They do it the South all the time for exactly that reason. So there's really there's no overall negative, but it's absolutely true that when the harvester, and it doesn't move fast, 1 mile an hour, they're moving through. They can do about an acre in a day. So it isn't really a very intense, it doesn't look like a Dr. Seuss thing and stuff flying all over the place. It's pretty mundane.
But in other areas, do they do them later in the season when it's colder, or is that actually worse because turtles and things are hibernating? Is there a time when, I could care less when Bartlett's going to use the plants? I mean, it's nice that they're going to use it, but I'd want to, if you're going to do something like this, you want to do it at a time when it causes the least amount of damage to the habitat.
Yeah,
So does it help?
well, the plants would be gone
Mhm.
in the fall, so there wouldn't be any reason. The only time to harvest would be in the summer.
Mhm.
I would say it would probably at least not be a good idea in May and June
Mhm.
when you're having spawning season,
Right.
because then a lot of the fish are actually attaching eggs to the plants that are up.
Mhm.
So, but then, with rare exceptions, I do. There's a lake at Wellesley that does a whole cut starting right before Memorial Day.
Mhm.
But again, it's a 107-acre lake. Only 40 acres are harvested, and a lot of the rest of it has plants. So it's not. And again, case here, we're talking about no more than 12% of the area. I don't think you could make much of a difference no matter what you did. You know, it can open up area and improve fishery dynamics. It will certainly improve recreation for kayaks, sailing, windsurfing, whatever. But in terms of actually making a major difference in the ecology of the lake at that size, I seriously doubt anybody would notice a difference. You're not going to see a collapse of fish populations. You're not going to see a change in the plants. We'll just have more open areas.
So how long does that seed bank last in there?
Years and years. Usually we think in terms of a decade.
So this will be an ongoing effort to keep this clear.
Yeah, it's mowing the lawn.
And it'll seed in from the other areas even if
Correct.
leave the seed bank in a
Correct.
certain spot, yeah, so.
I've been trying to get rid of invasive species in a couple of lakes with this. It works on water chestnut, because if you get them before they drop the seeds, you run the seed back out. It does not work on any of the vegetative reproducing. The milfoil
Makes it worse.
Hasn't made a bit of difference, yeah.
But
It's
it
just
does
becomes
work.
mowing the lawn. And in the case of the one in Wellesley, they actually have a town bylaw that forbids the use of any kind of pesticide on town property.
Mhm. That's a
So,
good one.
you know, so they have to do it some other way. That's how they choose to do it.
Mhm.
And how will you dispose of this material?
The plants will get mulched into the land. Where they're going initially to dry is very sandy. Whether or not they would mulch them into that or pick them up and take them to the actual farm property has not been
Or
determined.
it's going to be on the Bartlett property down there?
Well, that's where it's going to dry, for sure. My sense is that it's going to dry down next to nothing, and if they want to take it away, they're going to have like a truckload at the end of the season. It's not going to be much.
Yeah, there's not much of that stuff when you actually get down to it.
Right.
It's biomass.
Yes,
it's
90%
dry.
water, and there won't be much.
When you're harvesting, is just cutting it right above the bottom, or is it actually pulling it up out of the
No
benthos?
pulling up, it's strictly
Okay.
cutting.
Okay.
They would be cutting in 3 to 7 foot of water. The cutter bars at 7 foot are pretty rare. This is probably only going to be a 5 to 7 foot width machine. It probably won't cut deeper than 5 feet.
Okay.
Most of the area they're going to work in is 6 to 8 foot deep. So yeah, there's not intended to be any tearing up of anything.
Have people done like dissolved oxygen measurements after this has been mowed to
I
see?
do them every year on the one. Doesn't
Okay.
have much impact. Again, when it's shallow.
It's temporary it does, or no?
Well, it's interesting, when the plants are present, you see a gradient. You
Mhm.
take the plants out, you actually get better oxygen top to bottom.
Okay.
I'm hoping that by doing some of this area, we might see a reduction in phosphorus release from sediment in that pond. But we haven't actually proved that there is phosphorus release in sediment. That's a whole different project for the
Right,
summer.
right.
The subject of a grant application.
Will this have any impact on the algae? Especially
It
Well,
might.
if we're able to minimize release of phosphorus, it might. But again, we're talking about 12% of the area. I seriously doubt you'll see much difference.
Well, and it's recycling the phosphorus, so you're taking away one of the recyclers, but it's also dying, so it's
Yeah.
just part of the packaging for
You'll be
phosphorus.
removing phosphorus with the plants, but when you do the math, it doesn't amount to
Yeah.
very
Not
much.
very much, yeah. The whole big picture.
You kind of can't have both, your cake and eat it too.
Mhm.
I have a few concerns, I don't know how I'm going to vote on this. I can see some pluses and minuses, that's the fairest
That's
way to.
generally true for most lake management projects.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a balance. Again, if I was coming in and saying we're going to do all 142 acres.
I would say no, that would be
If
simple.
I said we're going to do the 90 acres in South Basin, I
Mhm.
wouldn't suggest that either. Oh, and frankly, the biggest machines out there can do about 45 acres in a season well. You might have to do 2 cuttings.
Right, right.
So you never do that much. It's a matter of creating lanes. I find it to be very good for the overall ecology of lakes, but it's absolutely true that there's particularly when you look at the wildlife and wildlife habitat. Interesting, everything you do in habitat benefits something and hurts something else.
Right, right.
So you got to strike a balance.
Both the Land Council and the NCF signed off on this? Do you know?
Signed off?
Well,
Land
this
Council or
is-
Land Bank?
I mean the Land Council.
They've certainly
Review
been
authorities, some
supportive
sort.
of it.
Yeah,
but this
the
is
Pond
not.
Coalition is, the people that are presenting this is called the Pond Coalition. So I'm just trying to figure out, as far as land, I mean, it's partially owned with, you're in a butter, Audubon, land banks in
Not
the
down
butter.
where they're working with.
Oh, okay.
We're further up the street.
Yeah, but no, it is not something that they have a necessarily a direct connection in terms of, it's happening out on a great pond. It's actually property of the state of Massachusetts.
Okay,
But they have certainly been supportive so far, yes.
okay. That was my question.
Karen, did you sit on this? Were you on that committee, or did some?
Yeah, we're supportive of this as a pilot project. And I think if there's anything we can do to remove some of the vegetation from the pond to alleviate some of the nutrient loading, it's worth exploring, definitely.
Thanks, Karen. Any other questions or anything from the public?
I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just trying to think what the benefit of this is. I mean, if it's not, do you notice a reduction in the plant growth the following year?
With seed-producing annuals, I would say no.
So it's just for navigation?
So it's more like a navigation aesthetic thing. But
Which
like
but the
actually
question
is in the act that that's an okay thing to do.
Well, it's a consideration that we have
I
when
know, it's-
evaluating a project is,
right. I mean, I don't see a lot of negative to it, but I'm not seeing a lot of positive to it. To be honest with you.
No argument. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an immediate benefit. It is not a lasting benefit. It is
Yeah.
a maintenance activity. It's mowing the lawn. It's really what it is.
Near the
Cutting
tail end of
trees
the
down
summer
in
too,
forest.
which is
Yeah, so we'll have to talk about that a little bit, but if we don't see negative impacts, it kind of comes under the general people have a right to apply to do what they want to do, and we're not a...
this is a wetland, it's not private property, so
This
it
is-
belongs to the Commonwealth.
I'm certainly concerned with like small turtles and things getting brought up in this harvester.
It doesn't happen much. I mean, I've ridden on these things, and you will occasionally get a turtle, but again, they must just throw them back. It's either, the conveyor comes right up where the guy is. And again, what they've normally done is just stop, just kill the conveyor, and the thing's just gone down and swim away.
I wouldn't want to be one of those little turtles who got,
Well, and
first
then-
year got put up there and thrown back in, but.
Carnival ride.
Yeah.
I've always been, my concern was always that the cutter bar would actually cut something up. Never seen it happen.
was it have like a blade system down?
Yeah, it's just reciprocal blades that go back and forth.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
you're, again, mowing the lawn. is
It's
what
a
it
mowing
is.
the lawn, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect cutter.
Again, the theory is that if you do it multiple times a year, keep the pressure on, you will push the community towards lower growing species that are below where you're cutting.
Mm-hmm.
It can work. It's not going to work in over 12% of a lake that has seeds dropping from all around.
Well, it's kind of like cutting the brush on a path and just cutting it, and eventually you get the
Yes.
forbs and the grasses and the sedges and other things grow there. Just
Yeah.
if it doesn't make a mess or cause any problems and you keep doing it, over time things will evolve in a different
It's just
direction.
that with seed-producing annual, the seeds are going to be there. Even if there weren't any other plants, the seeds would be there for,
Yeah.
think in terms of 10 years.
Right.
I've seen it work
Wow.
in about 5 years with like wooded chestnut, if you're on it right
Yeah.
away. But it does not have tangible long-term benefit. It's an immediate thing. There's no question it's being done for navigational interest, although it does actually represent a habitat improvement. And natural heritage was pretty clear, which I was a little surprised.
Yeah.
They were, yeah, this is fine.
Well, we have to keep it open for their letter, right?
Yeah, I
We're also
have,
missing a file number two.
And missing
yeah,
a file number.
I have it now, and are you guys familiar with that regulation change now? Because
I am now. That was one
yeah.
that.
So far, lake management folks are batting 0 for whatever this year. Every single one of us has gotten a call saying, oh, we can't give you a file number. I said, how are we supposed to, we had workshops, and none of us seem to have known about it. So the new regulations as of October
Yeah, no, I haven't heard.
require that all aquatic vegetation control projects
Mhm.
be considered ecological restoration limited projects. And they require a notice in the environmental monitor They require now that we submit for natural heritage comments prior to submitting the NOI, which was a total shock, and precisely the opposite, because natural heritage would refuse to review anything that was not a submitted NOI up until this year. And they will not issue a file number until you give them a checklist, which is Appendix A, showing all the parts of the ecological restoration verbiage that apply, which ones apply to you. It's 16 pages long, but no more than about 1 or 2 pages apply to any given project. And whether or not it's one of the ones that's automatically exempt, like daylighting a stream or taking out a dam, which this is not. And it just, the bottom line is it's added nothing to the process. I asked you, is there anything wrong with my notice of intent? No, everything's here. But you didn't give me the checklist. Okay. And I don't see a note that it was in the environmental monitor. It's already been submitted now, but it'll be in the middle of the month. And you don't have natural heritage comments. No, they get 30 days. And today was day 30, and sure enough, it showed up, which actually they usually don't make them 30 days, but I was impressed. So we're okay now, but yeah, you're correct. You should leave it open until you get a file number, and I will send you the comments when I get back Friday. And it will appear in the environmental monitor, and I will send everybody the documentation that appeared, and then you'll be good to go.
Okay, it's the first time I've encountered it too.
Yeah, but it's truthful. I stopped in Hyannis on the way down because there are a couple projects there, and the conservation agent she said we had to continue it because I didn't do these things. Like I was going to embarrass her. I didn't know either. So
they made a lot of regulatory changes that people are just going to cut up on.
It isn't clear when you read the regulations. It makes it clear that certain things are now basically automatically exempt. If I came in and said I wanted to remove a dam, you couldn't turn it down. I find that odd. Or I want to daylight a stream. Those are generally good things.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that applies to putting the dam in it, Panasonic. But at any rate, when you do, there's like 6 things that you cannot turn down. You can condition them, but you have to accept them. And then everything else is this limited project. It used to be they told us, don't apply for a limited project unless you absolutely can't meet the performance standards. And I said, I don't have any problem with performance standards. So no, you have to be a limited project now. Okay. So I said, this is about faces. Oh yeah, 180 degrees. The person I got was Christine Odiad, who was very knowledgeable, very nice, very patient. And I raked her over the coals, and she was very nice about it. I'm impressed. But she answered all the questions, and her supervisor left. She said, now I can be candid. And I said, yeah, there's a lot of stupid stuff in here. And there's differences.
Well, it's a major
between the
project in a pond, so they have to have a much higher level of scrutiny. It's not like on the one advantage, Andy, is that if it was herbicides, it'd be really a bad idea if they were adding some kind of herbicides or something to kill the plants.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And same with dredging. My biggest problem is if you do have a lot of decayed matter at the bottom. Not that I'm necessarily thinking this is a good idea, but it's not as bad as other ideas. I guess is one way of putting it.
But the whole question of whether it's a good idea or not is not what our
as far as the
purview.
health of the pond.
The question for us is how does it impact the things that we protect?
Right.
And I think we tend to wander off a little bit about whether how the engineers,
The
what the
bad idea
engineers
of
are
the park
done,
would
or
be, is it going to cost
what it's going to be, or what it's going to
Are there any
cost, or
further
how long it's going to
questions?
take, or things that aren't.
I don't.
Okay, guys, let's put an end to this. Are there any further questions, either from the commission or the public? Okay, so would you like to continue for 2 weeks? Unless I heard
That's fine. I'll have everything in you this Friday.
Well, we won't be together until.
No, maybe at least you'll have it and it'll be in possession.
Yeah.
So unless there's an objection, we'll continue to the 18th. Okay, thank you. See you in a couple of weeks. Oh, we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, Howard, do you need me for that one? Soon we can talk about that. I can certainly do it. It's just I don't know if you really need me.
I think it would be good just in
It'd be
case
smart to
something
come.
comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now we'll go to the Pond Coalition on Long Pond.
That's also me. And Ken Wagner, representing the Nantucket Pond Coalition. This is the start of something that certainly could trigger much more debate. This is a demonstration project to kill Phragmites using a foliar spray as opposed to the more traditionally practiced clip and drip approach. You're going to deal with large stands, acres and acres of Phragmites. It is not practical to try to do it clip and drip. I usually liken that to telling somebody it's okay to mow the lawn, but you have to use toenail clippers. It just is not going, you can't keep up. The concern, though, is that when you start spraying herbicides, it doesn't always go exactly where you want. There are resources in the area that could be impacted. So what we've asked to do is a project at Long Pond on a narrow strip of land that will essentially be a research project. They're going to spray a very thin fringe of Phragmites up two sides of the channel, and then a somewhat larger triangular mass at the northwest end. Well, it's called north, I guess, north and south above and below the bridge. And then we will be monitoring at plots within the channel and in the area land side of the Phragmites to document impacts. If this does an effective job with the Phragmites, and if we do not find significant impacts in the water or the landward side, this would in fact open the door for people to potentially propose larger scale project on larger stands of Phragmites on the island. To make no bones about it, this is really not about getting rid of Phragmites on these two little fringe strips. There's way bigger plots out there that need to be addressed. There's a whole philosophical debate as to whether or not we even try to do something with Phragmites. I mean, it's an invasive species, maybe not the worst one that's out there. It certainly has taken over large chunks of the island. There is a camp of people, in men not so on the island, that just says these are things you need to actively combat, and they can make pretty eloquent arguments that I admittedly happen to side with. There are others who say, yeah, well, now we're just going to spray an herbicide all over the place, and what else is it doing to our environment, and so on, and I can certainly understand that logic as well. The bottom line is, like in all projects, there are trade-offs. If we want to get control of Phragmites, and that's not a given, somebody may say, I just don't care enough to do it, but if people feel that this is something we need to do, and I have to believe it, as does the Nantucket Pond Coalition, then this is one of the approaches, and probably the most appropriate approach, to be used. This particular project is a demonstration project with more money being spent on monitoring than there will be on the actual treatment, so that we can demonstrate how well it works and what actually happens in terms of impacts. And I'm making no predisposition as to whether it will actually work well or whether it will or will not have impacts. We'll let the data do the talking.
So I didn't notice the herbicide concentration you were planning to use in the notice.
Yes?
So what were you planning to use?
It's I believe, a 3 to 7% solution. It's in there.
3 to 7%.
I believe so. That's what a typical foliar spray
Okay,
is.
and using a backpack sprayer,
Correct.
not a boom sprayer.
No, it's not a big enough project to do it. They'll probably be in a john boat, and they'll probably walk the landward side and spray out, so go in and out. In the slightly bigger patch, if we were doing a much bigger patch, they might be doing something different, like with a sprayer off of a low ground pressure vehicle, but in this case, they're just going to do that with backpack sprayers as well. The entire area to be treated is roughly half an acre, a little less. And then there's a control area set up on the other side of the bridge to do a direct comparison.
And you were going to use the additive, I forget.
Yeah, well, there's two. There's Sidekick and Agridex, and I definitely learned a lot more about that since the last time we talked.
Yeah.
The Sidekick is a citrus-based wood, basically a sticking agent, and the Agridex, although it sounds somewhat nastier, is just a soy-based thing. It's the same deal. If somebody has a preference, it doesn't matter if they've used both before. But they're both very benign as compared to the wetting agents and such that have sometimes been used in association with glyphosate, which tend to be more toxic than the glyphosate.
Sure.
But that's not the case in this.
I know the sidekick is limonene, which is a chemical found in citrus fruit, but I think it's a byproduct of the forestry industry where they get.
It's a terpene.
Yeah, it's a terpene.
And the Agridex is soy-based, so they're both vegetable-based, and really not much of a risk of anything. I mean, it really is the glyphosate that's the important thing here. Those are just made to help stick to the plant and get in.
And so for the monitoring, you're going to do before and after glyphosate sampling
Yeah.
in the water column?
Well,
and
actually
the
didn't
soil?
plan to do before since there wouldn't be any out there. I was trying to avoid the expense of that, but if you feel it's necessary, we could. I mean, there's no reason to believe there'd be anything there.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
No, if you don't. I just don't know if there's background levels from work done
Well,
elsewhere.
there has not been any, there was a mechanical removal actually in the control area 10 years ago. But I'm not aware of any spraying that was done there at any time.
Glyphosate's got a pretty short lifespan in the environment, so.
Yeah, it should
Yeah,
be.
the idea, again, I really am somewhat resistant to the idea of monitoring. I'd rather look for impacts first, but in conversations, we had to do something to say, hey, is it there or not?
Right, right.
So there will be sampling. I think it's,
I thought the impacts would be close to impossible to monitor, at least below the water. You know, above the water, you can say, are you killing other plants? That's simple enough. Underwater, it's a lot trickier, so
well,
it makes more sense to.
I would do it by looking at the plants in the water and the invertebrate fauna. That was the idea.
Yeah, if you did dredge samples, and
Right.
that you'd have to do. I think in the long
Well,
term it would be.
There's variability to it, sure.
Yeah. I think you'd have to do a lot of them. I
Yeah.
think in the long term it'd be.
I guess the way I would look at it is, if there isn't an obvious and substantial impact, I don't know that we would consider the problem. There's a little philosophical argument there. Well, if it's really, really minor, but over a big area, does that add up?
Right, it's a cumulative.
It's a fair discussion to have. But usually in these things, I try to set monitoring programs that signal it. Do we have this problem here? I mean, is there something really going on, or is this a matter of fine tuning? Because I don't think for a second that if we now said, okay, great, this worked fine, we found no impacts, we're going to do this 100-acre area, that we're not also going to have monitoring requirements there.
Mhm.
It just may help us fine tune what you really look for.
Right.
Yeah, and just, I checked sort of this general idea with Tim Simmons at Heritage, and
Mm-hmm.
he basically said that's what he would recommend to do. I mean, you know, again, on a large,
The invertebrate study or the
no,
No, he needs to
the
treat
this-
it, yeah.
The foliar
treating
spray.
them with
Oh,
foliar
okay.
spray with
No,
glyphosate,
Tim's been
yeah.
saying that for years. Yeah,
Yeah.
but he hates Phragmites more than like it so.
Yeah, he doesn't
So
like it, yeah.
if his kids had Phragmites growing out of their heads, he would spray them. He would.
This
And
one
so I
has to-
checked with our ecological management staff at Mass Audubon, and they, basically, this is what they recommend.
They also do it on their, as does the Nature Conservancy, as does Life. And again, it doesn't mean it's a wonderful thing to do. It's just, it is a way to get control over a problem species.
Mhm.
Well, and our regulations do address invasive species in terms of what exactly do we
Yeah,
say?
actually,
I'm just trying to
Natural
look it up
Heritage
here. but-
was even more clear on this one, and again, I was somewhat surprised. They said there was no problem with this whatsoever. They did not say what the listed species were that was the wrong pond that triggered their review.
I think some of those have only been found on hummock.
But I mean, Long Pond is crosshatched as estimated habitat, and they did not say for what, whereas they did tell me what it was in Hummock. So I don't know, but they just said, no, we don't have any problem with this at all.
Plants
It's
or
a-
inverts or fish or.
Didn't say a word.
But it was listed.
They said, actually, they said wildlife. Wildlife was not going to have an impact on NISA wildlife habitat. That was the word. Again, I'll get you the letter, you can read it. But I went back and looked again and said, what was it? Didn't say.
Okay, any other questions from the commission or the public?
Well, I was just trying to get to, Mr. Chairman, what exactly our regulations do say about invasives management. I didn't want to misquote it, but I think it says waivers are herein granted.
I don't know that we've only, I don't know if our regulations only have clip and drift, but we've only ever permitted.
Mhm.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Our regulation, typically we have clip and drip, is the way that it's.
That's the process we
recommend.
recommended in the, it's probably the lower impact. But as Ken's pointing out, at some level, you spend a heck of a lot more time, which means a lot more money.
Well, and if you prefer them to do a habitat assessment by doing benthic surveys for invertebrates, that's certainly something that is doable. In my opinion, it made sense to look for, and I'm a chemist, look for glyphosate and watch it degrade over time and show that that level's going down, because there are papers linked to certain concentrations of glyphosate and certain impacts. So it made more sense to me to use that information, and you expect glyphosate to go away. So it made me feel the best to actually measure the water column after the use of it, and make sure that it is going away.
And I've actually proposed both, that we would measure it, and we will look at invertebrates and plants in the water, and we will look at the plants on the landward side as well.
So that's perfect.
Yeah, periodically, we do talk here about
Getting sclerotic, what's happening to them, it should be pretty simple.
Yeah.
that each project is judged on its own. That whatever we've typically done over the past 6 months, year, or 5 years, carries only the significance that it does. That what we need to do is weigh each project in terms of its potential adverse impacts in light of our regulatory standards.
And glyphosate is, one of the lowest toxicity.
Yeah, and I'm all for that. Let's measure, let's see what's in the water, let's test it on some kind of
Yep.
I think he sent around the paper. Was like
reasonably objective basis and know what's going on.
Well, I sent around a lot of papers. Each creature it varies with. I think that he is putting in enough monitoring where we will be able to make informed decisions, after the fact, but that we will have a good handle on what kind of impacts. It is a pilot project. It is. I'm not jumping for joy over it. Let's just put it that way. If it was my way, but I can kind of see the merits of this.
It is a large pond too. That's going to dilute the chemical, but
if you treated all the Phragmites around the pond, that would be bad, though.
We picked the
Well, so it's taken a
location
beginning.
because it was narrow and very confined.
Yeah, it's taken a reasonable beginning to see how it works and
Yeah.
whether we start running into trouble.
Would you be testing the sediments? Seems to me,
Yes, it was
it bonds to sediments, doesn't it?
It does
Yeah.
bond to sediments.
That's
Yeah,
what I
it's very
reckon.
particle reactive.
Yeah, actually, it does.
That's probably where you would
The
see
water
it.
column is going to pick up, and that was, I went out today and had a look at it.
Yep.
It's pretty turbid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is very turbid.
Yeah, and even now, it was actually like plumes of turbidity coming up from holes in the ice. So
Yep.
frankly, anything that gets in the water is going to get inactivated by those particles really
Yeah.
fast.
But inverts and stuff burrow down
gonna
in
wind
there
up
and
on the
use.
bottom,
Yeah,
sure.
so they'll be
Sure.
ingesting stuff. So.
What time?
And to the best of my knowledge, nobody's ever found a substantial impact, and it's not effective on plants in the water, so I don't imagine that. But we'll look. See, let the data do the talking.
And this is one of those questions, somewhat like our bank armoring issues. I shouldn't conflate these things.
I would not, yeah.
Most everywhere else in the country, they've asked these questions long ago and resolved them to their satisfaction, and they use this method.
But other commissions haven't done this much monitoring. I do think this is beneficial in that respect.
Well, I think groups like the Nature Conservancy and things have done serious monitoring in the past and things. So, I don't know.
What's the time of year for this one?
I'm sorry.
What time of year are you going to do this one?
This would be done in late summer, early fall. The object is to go as late in the growing season as you can. You're trying to time it when they're translocating starches and such to the roots.
Prepping
You'll
for
take
the winter.
herbicide
Yeah.
with it, and you'll kill the plant better. If you go too early, you don't get good root death. If you go too late, you don't get anything.
Right.
So it also will require a little bit of watching and waiting and figuring it out, but I would think this would be like a late September thing, be my best guess.
A few other people I talked to were worried that it'd be like a three applications, that it's certainly not going to be a single one.
Usually two.
Two?
Yeah, I mean, if you really want, think of it like lot removals and stuff, you want to get 99, 99.9%, 99.9. The first one ought to get 90+%. The second treatment should get over 99% level. And there's no plan in this to go third one. It was assumed that there would be 2 treatments a year apart. Although, again, it all depends on the environment. If you find that most of the Phragmites is dead, then we won't do follow-up treating. Well, they do the talking.
Do you just leave the frag in place after it's
No,
dead?
they're going to cut it and mulch it.
Cut it down at how far down? Like below the water line or at the water
Well,
line?
most of this is actually sitting out of the water very close to the edge. I would say water line.
Okay.
Land line, yeah. And they do a coarse mulch. They don't recommend fine mulching because you get more decomposition and stuff getting.
And they pull that mulch out, or they leave the mulch in
No,
place?
They leave it. They leave it in place.
Okay.
You know, I mean, the nutrients stay potable again. It doesn't.
I was
turn
going to
out
say,
be
it's
a
not
lot.
going to help the
It
nutrients.
doesn't
yeah.
turn out to be a lot, though. Again, same thing with harvesting the plants. There's not much there. You know, this is the way it's generally been done. I can't tell you if that's strictly an economic thing or if they found it ecologically doesn't matter. I'm not clear on that.
Because I thought rafting was one way that Phragmites traveled around.
It does, but it's a whole,
The line.
the whole thing breaks off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big raft of, almost looks like soil. You can
Yeah.
Okay.
float
Yeah,
down
these are-
Mississippi on the dark.
In theory, these would be, yeah.
Okay.
My comment has that problem.
I'm just making sure that we don't
Yep.
go to a lot of trouble and then, yeah.
Yeah, well, and the flip side, of course, is since we're doing a very tiny piece of a lake surrounded by Phragmites, what keeps other stuff from rafting in the next year, but I think we'd be able to tell the difference.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Do you go in and like remove all the standing dead, like
First.
before the growing season starts? I know,
Yeah,
like with,
that's what, they will kill it and then either late that season, if there's time and conditions.
I mean, before you do the first treatment, even just go get all that standing dead out of there, so it's not intercepting.
They
herbicides.
generally have not done that, and I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does make sense.
I mean, I know you do it when you do clip and drip because you don't want all those extra steps.
Well, you
in
need to
there.
be able to, get at them, but,
I would
Good question.
recommend that. We've done that on our clip and drip projects, and it makes it a lot easier. To
Well, the
not
thing
have
is-
all that dead stand.
yeah, but the thing is,
stuff
if you've
there.
got live ones mixed with dead ones, you can't cut them and then do your foliage.
No, I'm talking
right?
about before the live ones even start growing, so
Like
this would be
now.
like April, May, before anything comes up, just
Cut
get
before
all the
there's
last
anything
growth out
new.
of there.
Right.
Interesting.
So that what
Okay.
you're spraying is all live vegetation, and you're not
Okay.
wasting your herbicide on the
It does
dead
make
stuff that's
sense.
already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
That's going to help
Should
lower the
propose it
amounts
that
used
we
in the water too,
Throw it in
because
as a condition. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know why it was not suggested, when we discussed the application.
It's an extra step, so therefore it's extra
Yeah, but
expense, but
yeah.
It does, I mean, it's that much less to get in the way,
Yeah, you're more likely to hit your
In-
leaves that you
In
want to
a,
hit.
in a small stand like this, that's not terribly difficult. In a really big stand, you would do this just with low ground head stuff and go on mowing it, so that doesn't, see, I guess it'd be the intermediate level stuff where it might be annoyance, but, it seems reasonable.
Is there any concerns, Karen, about mulching and leaving it in place? Have you guys ever done that?
no, we haven't, but, I mean, I don't really see any difference between killing it during the growing season versus it all dies back at the end of the growing season anyway, and
Mhm.
winds up
Sitting
in the
there.
water column, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just, I don't really see any difference one way or the other.
I didn't know if there was any studies on whether, once, kind of like with oysters, once you have oysters, you get more oysters. Once you have Phragmites, if you leave the roots and vegetation there, does that slow down the water
I'm
Not
flow?
not
always
aware of
so.
any studies. I mean, the only concern would be if it's already set seed,
Right, right.
and you might be spreading seed, but as you know, Ernie, the seed
There's
isn't
like
always
3
that viable
million
anyway.
seeds out there anyway, but yeah, like 1% viable
Yeah.
maybe, but
Right.
when you got a million of them,
Yeah.
that's a lot of
Right.
seeds still.
I have the concern that if, you never kill all the rootstocks. So something can come back from that, which is why you usually have a follow-up treatment. That's the way, and the way to deal with that is to excavate all that, which is not realistic either, so,
Right,
and
right.
much more impact, so.
Well, it's so
Fill it.
narrow.
Yeah, this particular one's,
It's such a narrow waterway. I'm trying to think of ways that would improve flow, and all along the pond would be to yank that all out.
yeah.
The opposite of the other.
And that's one of the things that frag does, it starts to grow in. and
Correct.
like
Which is
cats
why the
do
work was
same
done
thing.
10 years ago on the
Kill
south
'em.
side of the bridge. It was narrowing down to the point where nobody could go through.
Right, right.
But they just cut it back. They didn't treat it anymore.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's see, we don't have a file number on this one either. I
No,
guess.
it's the exact same situation, but again, I now have the natural heritage conditions. It won't be in the monitor, but I have sent the notice in. I will send all that to Christina Diaga on Friday at DEP, and in theory, she would be able to issue a file number at the very latest in the middle of the month when the environmental monitor comes out. So by the 18th, we should in fact
Okay,
be in
so you want
Does
to
that
continue
start?
to the 18th?
It makes sense.
If there's no more questions, we'll
I was just going to ask,
Did
does
you
that
have
start
a
a whole nother
comment, sir?
30,
If I may.
does that take up a 30-day thing after it's in the environmental monitor?
No,
Does
it's
that-
just, it just has to be in there and saying who to contact to see issues. It would be somewhat unfair to have it appear and the hearing already having been closed, but,
Yeah.
but other than that, no.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Charles Stott. I'm the president of the Nantucket Residents Association, a neighborhood association that represents about 150 member families in Nantucket. We are committed to the preservation of the natural beauty of Nantucket, and that includes the restoration of the quality of our waterways. And we strongly support this demonstration project for a number of reasons. The Phragmites block the view of the pond from some of the homes along the pond. Homes that at one time had a view of the pond from the first floor, but no longer do. They limit the navigable waters and restrict access to the pond for people who are trying to launch canoes or kayaks. As I understand it, they displace native species, and they offer little value to wildlife. A little history. One of our predecessor organizations, Tristram's Long Pond Association, about 25 years ago, launched an effort to raise money to eliminate the Phragmites, and they took care of a good number of them with the understanding that the town would do maintenance each year to keep these reeds at bay. As it happens, the next steps were never completed, and the Phragmites have returned with a vengeance. So we've got a long-term commitment to trying to resolve this issue. As Mr. Carlson knows, we met just a couple of years ago with him to explore options prior to the establishment of the Pond Coalition. So we're absolutely committed to this pilot project, and we hope that the Commission will approve it so that we can determine whether or not this methodology actually works without having any adverse impact on species. Thanks very much for your consideration.
Thanks, Charles. Anything else from either side?
So there we have concerned neighbors speaking in favor of a project that is proposed. That's not something that we see often here at the Conservation.
And I will say, I'm obviously representing the Nantucket Pond Coalition is really doing a nice job building partnerships on that island to do things. These are just the starts of stuff. There could be any range of types of projects done, but they're trying to pull people together and get everybody on the same side, the same page to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Both of these projects that we presented are kind of starter things to see how it goes, and we'll work from there.
Okay.
That's a question. When does frag flower? Time of year?
It's summer.
Like August?
August.
Yeah, I mean, the seed dispersal is probably by about this time.
Okay.
Since
It's a bee favorite.
Well, I mean, I guess.
So as long
it
as
is
it's
a
done
little
after the
ahead,
bloom,
so
that's
probably
that's fine.
disperses seeds for a long time.
Yeah.
Which I've never seen like cottonwoods where you see these huge flocks of seeds floating around. I don't know.
See the Phragmite honey?
Oh, it's a great honey.
Yeah, the primary movement is vegetative. It's like
Nantucket
you say,
Pond Coalition Water.
Same thing with other species. There's a million seeds out there. A small percentage
A million
are
eggs.
viable.
There's still a lot, yeah.
But the same thing with northwest. Oh, they're not viable. Well, one I know is, well, I've got 5 million seeds out here. I'm going to get some.
Okay, so unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this to the 18th. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you for your attention.
Thanks.
Okay.
So who are we going to hang? Who are we going to hang Paul?
That takes us to amended orders. Mackenzie and Hughes Phillips at 4 Swain Street.
Thank you. On behalf of the applicant, Paul Santos of the Nantucket Surveyors, this is an amended order of conditions request. To refresh your memory, we came back less than a year ago, I believe, for a property located on Swain Street, which was within land subject to coastal storm flowage, and there was also a bordering vegetated wetland that traverses a number of properties along the back side of this property, southerly of Swain Street. The property is out in Grand Point. At the time, it's a developed site. The house had been elevated some years back to be in compliance with the FEMA regulations, And what the applicant, property had sold, the applicant was looking to put a freestanding 8x10 shed on the property. The commission approved the order of conditions for an 8x10 shed. We had two options on the site. The client, I think, chose the better of the two options and actually constructed the shed up in this area here, tucked in the corner, which I think was the consensus from the board and myself of where the best spot was. But we did permit two separate shed locations.
Yeah, I remember this now.
So what he's looking to do now is essentially rebuild an existing deck on the property, and in doing so, not only rebuild it, but expand it by about 2.5 feet in both the southerly and westerly direction. And that's the request before you is an amended order for the reconstruction and expansion of the deck. I have submitted an additional waiver request specifically for that work. It is based on the premise that there are no reasonable conditions or alternatives that will allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulations. And similar to what we asked for the sheds, but I just asked for a separate waiver for the expansion of the deck. It does occur again within the fully developed area, and it is essentially though within the 50-foot, because the majority of that whole backyard area is within the 50-foot no-build setback. And that's what we're looking to do. The existing deck is shown, and the proposed deck is shown overlaying it, and what you see is about a 2.5-foot push to the south and to the west. And that's what the request is before you tonight. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
So we'll just throw out really quickly that we've actually already waived the pertinent regulation as part of the shed project.
Yeah.
He's more supplementing to include the deck. Normally, if we wouldn't have waived it already, a lot of times we ask for a new filing to deal with this, but since the exact regulation has already been waived, it's an amendment. I know it's confusing.
And the deck does occur northerly of the location of where
The shed was.
the worst case scenario shed was.
Right.
But and that, like I said, that was.
Yeah, we'd already determined there was no adverse impact from
the
the
shed.
building being closer to the wetland.
Yeah.
And this is one of those case-by-case ones, amazingly enough.
Now she wants to come and build near the wetlands.
Any other questions? Okay, Jeff, have a recommendation.
Recommend that we can close and issue an amended order of conditions.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, now the lot.
Google action here on Mackenzie Phillips.
Oh, yeah. Music stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, Don Draken, Director of Engineering, representing the applicant. This is the second amendment we requested. Major aspects of the amendment are the existing building that's on site is going to be completely raised. The original application called for maintaining the existing building and adding some additions to it. But since that point, they've done some interior investigation and decided that the whole building would have to be raised, and they've got that approved through HDC. The other changes consist of the reconfiguration of the handicap ramp in the front of the building, the adding of a handicap ramp on the south side of the building. Before we had just shown a walkway, and they realized they needed handicap access to get to that section of the building. There's also a deck and stairs added in the alcove on the north side of the building. The other positive change is the square footage of the building was slightly less than the total square footage that was already approved. If you recall, there's some fill on the site. The original order conditions had some steel sheeting that was going to be required to excavate out the fill. And then we had talked about possibly using helical screws rather than digging it out and bringing in structural fill. And so that determination has been made, so we don't need the sheeting anymore. We're going to use helical screws, so there'll be very limited excavation, only enough to stabilize the area and put some gravel and stone down, maybe a foot or so. So in that aspect, the work on site excavation work is a lot less intensive than what was already approved. with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, so Jeff, can we close an issue on this one as well? Do I have a motion to close the hearing and issue the amended order?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Yes, so now we go to the public meeting, request for determination,
All right, real quickly.
B&D Real Estate Trust at 94 Quidna Road.
I'm actually going to be covering this one. This is Mr. Ritz's project. So, it's really straightforward. It's a lot of equipment near the Sackage Pond access. It's kind of up the dirt way from Sackage Pond. The resource area they're asking to confirm in this case is the coastal dune, located at the green line on the back of the plan. They're just looking to confirm that resource area boundary. We did go out there and confirm that boundary. So I'll just cut right to the chase and say that we'd be recommending a positive 2A confirming that resource area.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thanks, Jeff. National Grid. Cliff Road from Beacons Way to Cape Pond Road.
Good evening, I'm Brad Nalo from Coastal Engineering Company. Deb Blanche from National Grid is also here this afternoon. I'd like to introduce, I don't want to encumber the process here, but I have brought tonight a modification plan, and there's no material changes to the project. The plan that, if the commission so agrees, I'd like to submit this plan that includes some construction notes and a couple of other notations in details. And the purpose of these changes would be just so that the contractor would not have two documents. This would be one document that would serve the construction notes as well as the information on what the commission's pleasure would be in that regard. The project itself is a proposed electric conduit. There would be 6 conduits of electric adjacent to a telephone conduit laid in one trench, and this would be installed along the northerly edge of the existing paved road surface of Cliff Road, just to the west of Beacons Way. All of the work is proposed in a kind of a grassy, gently to moderately sloping hillside that lies between Cliff Road and the paved bike path. There is a wetland to the north of that area. I had an on-site with Jeff back in January before the snow was around. And as notated on the drawing, we're not requesting acceptance of the delineation of the resource area, but stipulating that the work would be within the jurisdiction, of course, of the commission. But all of the work is confined between Cliff Road and the bike path. We're proposing a siltation barrier between the work area and the existing resource area. This would be an open excavated trench to lay the electric conduits in. Any open areas would be backfilled on the same day. There'd be no grade changes. Any surplus material from the installation would be removed from the site, and any of the areas would be seeded and revegetated in kind. If you have any questions.
So this comes under an RDA instead of under notice because
the amount of work doesn't necessitate the filing of the notice of intent. It's kind of a discretionary call at times.
And how close is it to the resource area?
It's greater than, work like this is permitted all the way down to the 25, and this crosses just over the 50.
And does it come with a staff recommendation?
I would still recommend the -3 to allow the work in the buffer zone without requiring the filing of the notice of intent.
Without requiring the filing of the notice, and then the -3, and that does or doesn't confirm, it does not confirm.
No, we are not confirming resource area boundaries. So if we so wanted, we could add on I want to say it's a -1 that doesn't actually be a negative, it would be a positive 2B to
not
confirm.
physically.
Yes, we'd want to be really clear that what we're doing, that we're saying the work is okay, but we're not confirming the resource area. So I'd go ahead and make that motion, Mr. Chairman, -3 and positive 2B.
Second.
Everybody's ready to vote on this? No more discussion or questions?
Just as a point of clarification, once again, if the motion carries, if it could be referred to the new plan?
That's fine.
That would be, okay, which is dated today, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all in favor of Mike's motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Which road? Fiddle around for now.
Okay.
Appointment.
Peacock at 46 West Mycomet Road.
Tom Bracken from Bracken Engineering, for the applicant, covering for Stan Humphries tonight, didn't be here. This RDA is strictly for the proclamation of resource areas on the site, which include coastal beach and coastal dune. Mr. Humphries' flag and the coastal dune flags are out on the site. We located them, and we've also located his test borings. So we're asking for the delineation that's shown on that plan to be approved.
Jeff, did you and
Yes,
and or Bruce?
both of us have reviewed them, and we are in agreement with the delineation. The coastal dune one's a little interesting because there's not a regulatory standard for coastal dune, so to say. So this one's kind of based upon some soil borings and the general topography of the site, being the backside of kind of that continuous slope. I think we feel pretty confident that for when we were there, that the coastal dune is correct. So again, this would be a positive 2A, confirming the resource area.
Gotta tell this guy to stay within the line, see? Coloring
moved.
outside the line.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, minor mods. Mass DOT at 4 Goose Pond Lane.
Before we started this, why is this a minor mod instead of a NOI for this?
Well, that's what we're going to discuss. I was hoping that Mike would be here. But,
Oh, Mike Burns, yeah.
So,
It seems like
sorry, and the real reason I really brought it forward is I was hoping to get a little guidance from you guys.
Mhm.
I do apologize for the big ones.
I just read a little bit about it. It just seemed like
Is it? Again, this is one that was kind of close, so I'd rather bring it in front of you guys. You guys
Sure.
I just sign summarily. So through their process through HDC and Mass Historical and planning and all that fun stuff, the bike path project has taken some significant changes in what's going on. So there's the elimination of some significant portions of steel sheeting, and then on the kind of the midpoint, excuse me, on the first page on the eastern end, the installation of a couple of riprap slopes in place of that riprap, in place of the steel sheeting, and there's spots that the sheeting is being eliminated altogether. So I guess.
So in the areas that say eliminate steel sheeting, then that would stay
wanna
vegetated?
fill?
Correct. The sheeting will no longer be there whatsoever. So they're reducing the steel sheeting from about 875 feet to about 535 feet.
Oh, we can't allow that.
And then in the one spot that kind of straddles there, you can see where the riprap slope is going to be, is instead of having the sheeting, they would rather install that riprap to hold that section instead. And then the other two pieces that are noted on there are not really too much in our purview, but there were little cobble splitter islands that built into the pavement to keep bikes to go this way and this way. kind of 6 and 1/2 dozen. I guess I was just wondering about, I mean, we permitted the 875 feet of steel sheeting, that if the reduction in sheeting, even with the conversion of the sheeting to the riprap in the one spot, was still a modification to what had been permitted, or if this was something that we'd rather amend to do.
I think it's a good idea to get rid of the steel sheeting, but it might be a big enough change
But-
to.
But aren't they expanding this, the riprap, are they going into the wetland and filling into the wetland with this
Yeah.
riprap?
So, I mean,
No.
we should have a.
The whole argument was that they're not increased, they're not.
The footprint.
No, the riprap is still outside of the wetland area. It goes adjacent to,
Yeah.
but does not go within.
Even at high water? It's not underwater?
Well, that's the interesting question, is when they change out the box culvert that's going to be there and you have a different flow in
Right.
the area,
Mhm.
if that wetland is going to shift or have a greater tidal influence than it currently does, where the flow is not very substantial in and out of that pond. It goes up and down, but
So that's on the landward side, not
Yeah,
the,
ponds
not the harbor side.
yeah, if you look, the riprap is on the Goose Pond side, and Nantucket Harbor is on the other side. So,
The Goose Pond side, where the
yeah, so the riprap is going on.
raw sewage overflows from time to time?
Oh, yeah, it's a
So
lovely
you can
area.
see,
It's
so
very
here-
downtown.
here's the riprap.
Yeah.
And this is Goose Pond, this is the Nantucket Harbor side here.
Is there a cross-section of this whole?
So, and then I did forget, sorry, on this side, there's also a little small section of, no, excuse me, that was already permitted there, sorry. So it's only the stuff we read.
Most of it looks like it's actually going to be better than what they proposed.
I think so.
I think it's a better design. I don't know whether it qualifies as a minor modification.
It's actually changing the plan and changing the length of what we had permitted, and then a material conversion for the one section. You guys can see why I was torn.
Yeah, it's kind of a border.
Well, what would we do if we, the other alternative is to slow the project down, file a notice, an amended...
No, you can do an amended order.
Could I just finish what I'm suggesting here? And it would be file an amended order and re-notify everybody and have it, and have another public hearing, and would we end up conditioning this differently?
I think what I'm gathering is this is going to be approved anyway.
That's what I'm getting to.
But you can condition amended order, you can't condition a minor mod, right? You couldn't, if we felt there was any kind of new conditions.
And do we see something that we think would be needed?
I'm not sure we do. I'm not sure any of our conditions would change, but I don't have all the conditions in front of me. But yeah, no, I see your point.
If we're not going to need to condition it anymore, then why prolong it, protract it, or do any more with it if there's nobody here to call any issues to our attention that we would have somehow otherwise escaped those?
So I can add in really quickly if it would be helpful. Outside of our normal conditions, we did have all material removed from the site. Shelley put through the digester for the invasive species issues. No black oak is permitted by this order. Some of the plantings originally had some black oak that was suggested. And then photographs shall be provided demonstrating the condition of the sheeting, multi-use path, and vegetation management areas at the beginning and end of the growing season, or until certificates of compliance is issued. And the final condition was that the split rail fencing installed shall have only 2 rails.
But this is honestly not in the wetland?
That's being removed, so there won't be sheeting
Anything
there.
at all? So
No,
that-
it'll just be the
Okay.
slope as it sits today
Okay.
will be there.
So there's 3-4 areas where the sheeting's removed and 2 areas down here at the beginning?
No, it's kind of confusing because
Okay.
the plan has
It's
a match line.
backwards. Okay.
Go to the next page.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this riprap slope here is the start of this riprap slope here. So there's a match on this plan that's in here that they just decided to have a label. So that's the section. So you can kind of envision it sits
Like that.
kind of like so. So this is the one section riprap that's outside of the wetland. And then that section of steel is going away.
So altogether, it's about 1,000 feet of steel going away?
No,
I'm sorry.
there's 875 feet currently permitted,
Oh, okay, I'm
and they
sorry.
are reducing it to about 540 feet
Okay, so,
of steel.
300 feet of steel going out of there, which is probably
yeah, I mean, we didn't want the steel at all to begin with.
I'm just saying that it's not.
So they are eliminating 339 feet of steel.
Okay, and then adding that riprap. Well, maybe that is more like a minor mod.
Okay,
And I don't want to leave out the cobble splitters.
Because that's on top, right?
Yep.
In the
That's-
asphalt
that's
that's
built
still
into-
there?
Correct.
Into the flipping asphalt that I,
kids weren't paying attention off their bikes. So.
well,
I
Can we-
have a question, or not to-
Yeah, go ahead, Em.
yeah.
Just sort of wanting to understand it all as well. So the new riprap slope is on existing slope and is not, even though it's outside of the wetland, obviously it's within the buffer zone. It's not actually an extension or creating additional fill. Is that correct? It's just reinforcing the existing
It's
slope?
reinforcing the existing slope in place of the sheeting that they had
Okay.
permitted there.
But they're going to be grading it anyways,
And they'll probably normalize the slope beneath it when they install the riprap,
right?
but I don't believe they're.
normalize the slope.
Yes. So if there's like a lot of little rivulets.
Yeah,
and
right,
gullies,
Yeah, I gotta write that one down.
They're going to clean it
So,
up and use the
they
riprap to
make it
stabilize the edge.
a regular base.
I mean, it will stabilize them better than steel
Right.
sheeting. For an engineering point of view, this makes sense. This is what I would do. This is what they should have proposed, actually. Can we get them to take off those asphalt while we're at it? I'm just asking, it never hurts.
The only other question I had, and maybe I'm just forgetting, you guys discussed this when it was already up, but the seed, compost and seed, I don't know. I guess I see seed all over here, so you guys probably already discussed that last time. I didn't.
Correct. They provided, that's when we specifically called out that they weren't allowed to use black oak because they had provided their planting list, and one of the species they had proposed to plant in the, you can see the little ornamental tree areas there, were originally proposed as a couple as black
Put
oak.
kibosh on
Really
that,
want
and
weeping
yellow
willow?
trees.
Yeah, I know, that's kind of bizarre.
Well, this is new if it's in red, right? So we can say we don't want that.
Correct.
I don't know, you're the plant guy.
And weeping willows aren't.
They're fine.
native here.
No, they're not native, so why are we letting them plant on
I
it?
can't hear what we're.
Oh, one of the plants proposed is a weeping willow, and I was asking Ernie, does that, anything we have to worry about?
We could,
It doesn't matter to me, I just don't know. That's another, if it's in red, it's a new request?
Correct. That's what they are
probably doesn't
proposing.
go anywhere.
I doubt it's gonna do anything.
No, it's
Yeah.
not gonna spread around
Okay, so it's fine. Yeah, it's not obviously on any.
So I go ahead and make the motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the minor mod
Do I have a second?
as recommended by the
All in favor?
administrator. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay. So certificates of compliance, the land bank at
I'm not gonna try it.
23 North Liberty Street.
All right. This one is a little funky still. This is in the continuing saga of 15 North Liberty Street, the one that we've closed out twice now. Their title researcher found another order of conditions that was recorded against that same, like, 15, 17, 19, 21, and 23 in 8 Westco Place for Lily Pond. And when they subdivided the parcel off and sold it, they didn't close out any of the land bank permits on it. This is hopefully the last one that we found. So what we're asking to do is for 15 North Liberty Street is to issue out a partial certificate from this lot. This is more invasive species work on all of Lily Pond. It doesn't impact the residential lot, to close out the order on the residential lot only, and then it will remain open.
We're closing out 15 or 23?
15. It's, the original request on it is listed for 23. It's recorded on the property at 15 because it was included in the Lily Pond parcel.
15 was then cut out?
Was then cut out.
If that's one that had the violation on it with the
With the pipe that is.
pipe that was discharging that was installed by the land bank?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're just trying to get it off of their title.
So it's a housekeeping.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't care. Yeah.
So do I have a motion to issue this certificate of compliance for 23?
Mr. Chairman, just discussion on that. Can we just be sure and indicate in the minutes that what the administrator just indicated, the question that I had was, is that the one that had the violation with the discharge directly into the wetland? And the answer was yes.
Okay. Let's see, a motion and second. This is to issue the certificate.
Yes, okay, good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Then Tom Nevers Road, BLN. 98 Tom Nevers
Which one
Road.
without any comment? Just pick one he wants. Makes you crazy.
All right, this was for kind of the residential development of this lot at 98 Tom Nevers Road. So house and fencing and stairs and pool and second dwelling and everything that's shown there within our jurisdiction.
So it's all good.
Yes, everything that's there is in substantial compliance.
No ongoing conditions.
There are no ongoing conditions.
Okay, move to issue as recommended.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, orders of conditions.
Is there an extension request first, or?
Nope, that's actually after that.
Oh, okay.
Usually put those last.
So the first one we have is ATGDRS.
Nope, we actually continue that tonight.
Continue.
I was doing some wishful thinking that we were going to get our determination from Heritage. Did not. So, the first one we'll be doing, Mr. Chairman, is the Silent Elves. Ceylon Elves.
Salon.
Salon.
Why can nobody say salon?
I think we're talking about okay. Ceylon Elves, whatever it is. It's at 286 Pulpus Road.
Yes, this was that kind of significant site redo that I presented earlier this evening. And from our discussion, the only condition that I think I remember us wanting to add is the number 23, that no fertilizer is to be used inside the 50-foot setback.
Yep.
Other than that, it's pretty typical. Number 22 addresses our concerns with the IA system, that are pretty normal. 21 is the pool condition that's there. And then I just added in a condition 24, just a yearly report that demonstrated the condition and function of the ditch and box culvert that's being installed. It's running between those two, but other than that, I won't say I was at a loss, but it was kind of it.
No waivers?
Other is just on the
Oh,
next website over. It's pretty extensive because they're doing a lot of work, but I think I had broken out that the removal of the structural areas and the upgrade of the existing septic system qualified as a net benefit, and that the rest that was going on, so when they like reconfigured the house and it overlapped the 50s still, but it was less that overlapped the 50s, that reconfiguring that was not going to be an adverse impact. It wasn't reasonable.
No reasonable alternative. That's great. Both waivers on that.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue as amended?
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Should be noted that it's kind of sprawl out as the meeting goes on. Later on. Slightly overlapping in space.
Okay, 22 Lily Street.
All right, this is the one, 22 Lily Street.
Bennett, I guess it is.
This was the one that was the second floor porch that was on the
47
posts.
feet away from the house.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Again, it required a waiver. It's a waiver that was requested under no adverse impact and reasonable alternative. I couldn't think of any conditions.
No,
No.
It seemed pretty
it seems
straightforward.
pretty straightforward.
Move to issue, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, Okay, McCarthy Nantucket House LLC at 12 Coffin Street.
Yep, this one is a little bit different because in our last discussion, it didn't really come up much tonight. There was some concern of some of the neighboring and adjacent invasive species around this place, a lot of knotweed and stuff kind of in that general neighborhood. And we wanted to at least include conditions for them to deal with any invasives if they came back in. So it's our pretty standard herbicide and reporting conditions that are there. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward. The only other condition that I included was that their construction materials be stored outside the 50-foot setback for construction.
Since the whole,
Allow 25% glyphosate, that's on a clip and drip method, not a sprayer.
Yep, this is not, do you want me to specify? Look at this on
Yeah,
that?
clip and drip, yeah.
I'll just add that to the end of 20, that no greater than the use of 25% glyphosate water-based solution, the use of triclopyr with your equal, and a concentration not to exceed the label directions
Yeah, that pretty much,
to be applied by clip and drip.
that pretty much covers it, because the label would say in that concentration for clip and drip and a lesser it's hard to say, a lesser concentration
Yes.
for,
It's a tongue twister.
the label really would cover that.
More or less it does, but not exactly. I mean, I remember having to experiment with concentrations on loosestrife because they, recommended such a low concentration, but it was for spraying,
yeah.
which was pretty much ineffective for leaf,
Yes,
yeah, or, so you have.
but when you're going to use a higher concentration, it's for the clip and drip.
But nobody does that, so they don't know what
All
they're
right.
talking about.
This is the really wet lot.
Yes. This is the one that's on Coffin Street, kind of
Yeah.
catty-corner to the lobster trap.
So we're ready to go ahead and issue as fixed up there? Move to issue that as fixed up by the administrator?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. No surprise at me, but I guess it's been raised.
Yeah. Is it very reluctant? We should have a maybe option listed by your name. A meth.
They just put like a
MEH.
sub-
So.
We need to
I've
start
said
thinking about-
reluctantly as before.
The next one is Norton, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Norton on 24 North Cambridge Street.
Yep. So this is the one out in Nantucket. That was for the upgrade of the septic system, and then the two additions on the house and the installation of the pool. Oh my goodness. You can strike number 20. Sorry. Forgot to erase that. So number 20 is not applicable because there's no bulk over proposed. But the other ones are still good.
That would be good. So just renumber them.
Yep. So 21 will become 20 and 22 will become 21, but they're, again, are pretty standard pool and
Now,
IA
on all of
system.
these, we're just going with what the Board of Health does as far as recommendations. Some, for a while, we were actually making our own recommendations for testing.
Yeah, we just got kind of at odds with what the Board of Health is requiring, and there was a time where they were a little bit more restrictive, and then there was a time when we were a little bit more restrictive, and we've kind of come together just to have the same standards and reporting to keep
Okay.
it simpler for everybody.
Okay.
It's easier for everyone to track too. So there's a waiver on the back too for this one. Same kind of idea that the septic upgrade is a net benefit, and the house that's going to impede on the 50-foot by 0.7 square feet for the waiver criteria there would not be an adverse impact.
Mhm.
Essentially, what that's the gist to it.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue as amended?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, now, Town of Nantucket on 15 Harbor View Way. This is the boat ramp, Children's Beach.
Correct. So the first one is the boat ramp that's here. I looked through some of our other stuff that we've done, and I kind of made a hodgepodge here, so just to make it clear, so you guys have number 19, that all materials and machinery are to be stored outside of the resource areas, that all refueling of land-based machinery is to be done in excess of 50 feet from the water line. The barge shall maintain the best possible separation from the bottom of the vessel and land under the ocean at all times. That's when we put in for 16, 20, and 22 Easton Street, those tidal fluctuations. Then 22, a siltation boom shall be attached to the barge and set up to confine the active work area, which is something that's already in the protocol that I thought it would be nice to keep there.
Yeah.
And then this was a condition from the Division of Marine Fisheries that it's just any work between the dates of January 15th and May 31st may not produce silt. Work behind a cofferdam can be performed during this time period, provided that the cofferdam or dewatering associated with the cofferdam does not produce siltation into the waterways. So they can install the coffer, work inside of the coffer. We just don't want
You can't.
silting
You're in high well
coming,
waves. Yeah.
right, coming over. DMF requested that as part of protection for winter flounder spawning during that time. So it's pretty typical, and I think that the siltation boom that's used, and then with the cofferdam itself, and that we're coming inside of it, it's going to be
Is there any concerns for the hatchery with?
especially this year. This is the perfect year to do it because our hatchery is going to be under construction.
True.
So
Yeah. So you.
this is a very aptly timed project.
Yeah. It was funny in the paper. They're like, "Oh, it's going to take a while." But that's the other part. That's the Army Corps and the.
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue this as drafted?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
I need to ask Dave, did you have any other recommendations for conditions, David?
No, you got it covered.
Okay. It's really helpful to have someone that's so knowledgeable about this stuff.
Someone that built these things.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we have Town of Nantucket, 34 Washington Street. This is the rebuild of the town pier.
Yeah, it was kind of lost. It's kind of the same conditions as before, with the exception of the cofferdam condition, because there's not a cofferdam. So
They're going to have movable silk curtains while they're jetting out the. It's just
yeah, typically they do. They'll hook them onto the barge, and they create kind of like a little work pocket to remove those. And now when they did one over at the hatcheries, they put up a little curtain boom that's there to kind of contain their work area. So when they're taking those things
It
in and
worked
out,
pretty good over that.
yeah, when they take those things in and out, they keep it pretty clean. And they keep it for what they're doing. I mean, it's kind of an in-kind replacement, so they kind of pull one out and put the new one in. So it
Oh,
usually
at the
goes
same time? Okay.
usually goes pretty well.
Well, it does make sense because otherwise it'll just
Yeah,
fall
you
right
do
back.
it
Yeah.
all wholesome, fresh.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That if
So-
we wait to even.
I know our experience at the hatchery is, and other spots, that turbidity is usually, given the circumstances, is pretty minimal.
Okay.
But someone will certainly.
Is there a time of year?
Amazingly
condition?
not, they did not have the same time of year restriction for this
Really?
one. Yeah, because
Huh.
the activity, I think, is considered to be a much less impactful activity than the cofferdam and placement of.
It is,
of
aside from
concrete.
the pylons, there's really nothing that
Yeah.
can disturb the bottom.
Okay, that's
So,
interesting. I thought
yeah.
they'd be pickier because it's closer to a viable habitat.
No, I even called Eileen and
No,
asked
no,
because I was surprised that those conditions didn't match for the two of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And they did not. And then the other project that we're working on North Wharf with that bulkhead replacement that they sent comments on, didn't contain that same timing restriction as well. And there's the setting steel sheeting in front of the other steel sheeting. They're not as concerned with it with the curved
Sure.
boom that's there.
Yeah.
So it's, apparently they're looking at them, but it's kind of interesting that those don't always match.
Aside from using the property, you straighten the bottom on the boat. And
Yeah.
everything's coming up. But
Yeah.
everything, that overburden that's on it, you're gonna flop all around. It's gonna be a mess.
Yeah, it is.
Property and containment.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I have a motion to issue this as drafted?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. All right,
Happy to
okay.
see we got through this.
Yeah, I'm glad we got through that. Okay. Hold us responsible.
And then I don't think I have any other ones I have any questions about the rest of. So,
Okay, so
Got
we'll
the
move on. Extension orders.
We won't be closing the pond coalition.
Please call on trustees of the Cliff Act Realty Trust.
so as, sure.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. This is a 2-year extension request for an order of conditions for a vacant lot at 96 Cliff Road. The property recently sold. We did come back with an amended order of conditions for the new owner. He has been through HDC, has all of the approvals and plans to start construction now in September. Unfortunately, the permit expires in April of this year, so we're asking for a 2-year extension request in order to construct the home and still have a valid order of conditions.
Is there any comments or questions? Do I have a motion to issue the extension?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, cool.
Okay, anything else we need to discuss, Jeff?
No.
Okay, then the minutes. So we have minutes from last week's meeting to approve. There's
Just a
no-
yellow, that is shell recycling program,
That's correct.
so that's correct. Oh, you had something highlighted for shell recycling program, but that's correct.
Okay.
I still don't know what way for Cohen. I think it was a street off of Cliff Road. Is there a street?
Those are already, that's,
Any
We
street
signed.
that ended, that was
She
named
still has a
way
question about that.
in the area
Okay.
of that, so I don't know if you're talking
I
about.
can fix that for you.
In a way, yeah.
She's still had a question about
that one, yeah.
You
I'm just trying to fix it
you
for
want to
you.
hold it until I get it fixed, so go ahead and amend it, but get that to me tomorrow.
Yes.
This is
Okay.
town clerk's waiting for it. So
That's
that would be approved as amended.
so where are we? We're on the one that needs to be fixed, huh?
Yeah.
Well, no, I just had a question. I just didn't want to forget that again. And
No, I
Okay.
dug that out. I can.
okay, good.
So, okay, so how would we word that motion, Jeff?
That would be a motion to approve, no,
Yes.
motion to amend previously approved.
Minutes.
Okay, so I did a motion to amend
Sure.
the minutes from the February 4th, 2015 meeting and approve the amendment.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, then we have the minutes from the last meeting.
Did it work all right? I didn't see any other questions.
That's
Yeah, it's in the packet.
Unless there's an objection, we'll approve those minutes from last meeting by unanimous consent. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, reports. We don't have a CPC rep right now. NPEDC.
Nothing.
Nothing? Mosquito Control Committee.
Nothing? We haven't
Anything else?
We did get the last $7,500 for the Blue Pages from the Shellfish Association. Actually, it was one of the last things that BAM helped to do. So they're going to pay for the rest of that to be created, and then hopefully the town and the Land Council will help us get it printed and distributed.
Great.
We'll figure it out.
Okay, commissioners' comments. Anybody have any comments?
The service, for people who don't know, that service is Saturday for BAM at 11 o'clock, I think, at the Congregational Church. And then at...
That's the North Church?
Yeah, oh, shoot, I can look it up.
Center Street.
Yeah, down, halfway down Center Street.
Yeah.
In Alabama.
At 11 o'clock, yeah. And then after that will be a food and storytelling at Nantucket Admiralty, which will probably go late into the evening.
That'd be interesting.
What's the protocol for replacing our
I'll get to that. So,
Jeff?
so we are going to have to advertise to replace that. And I know we've kind of already put that together to try to get someone in as quickly as we can. And that person, we're hoping at the third meeting in March, or shortly thereafter. I'd have to double check the actual deadline.
That's what Rick was saying.
Yeah,
They wanted
will
to
be
do
when the
that.
selectman appoints someone to fill the remainder of BAM's term.
I think a couple of people that have served before are
Yeah, so I
interested.
definitely, if you know anyone that's interested or someone that would like to fill in, it's not the full 3-year term at this point. I think Bam had 1 more year left.
Year and a half?
Year and a half left.
Yeah.
So it would just be completing that term.
I mean, you just put a name in, or do you go back
No,
to
it's
people
this-
who
They
ran
have to,
against them?
they have to.
No, it's the same procedure that you do. You have to fill out the
Okay.
application,
Yeah.
and the selectmen will review it.
Right.
They'll decide amongst the 5 then who's going to fill that.
I think Ian's going to reapply, and Ian was really good. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely, if anyone knows anyone that's interested,
I
always.
suggested to Jen that she reapply, but I didn't expect a positive response.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, but again, so pass along. I do, while we're on that subject as well, so we'll hopefully have that within the month or a little bit over a month and have a full board of 7 again. So we know there's any attendance issues or 3 to 3 votes. Would not be more than awesome. I did, however, pick up, if anyone is interested, and anyone else, Emily or Joe or Terry, I do have a card that I was going to send off to Bam's family. If anyone wants to fill in, it's just right here. Feel free to write whatever comments you want, and then I'll be sure that the family gets that card kind of on behalf of the commission. So by all means, send any personal card you wish, but if you want to sign on, send it from on behalf of the commission.
I think they'll be accepting donations too. We're trying to figure out where to. One of my suggestions actually was to donate money to the Concom for purchasing land, but now that we're losing a lot of our land and it's going to other coffers, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
So that's it for me.
Okay, so before we close, I would like to have a brief executive session to talk about our negotiations with SBPF and where we go from here. So
Fine with me.
we'd have to clear the room.
Well, you need to make a motion to go into executive session first. There
Okay.
needs to be-
We have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, do we need to have a voice vote on this?
No.
I think you, I believe you do.
Yeah, it's supposed to, sorry, it is a roll call vote for
And
executive
before you do that, I would like to just, want to make sure our record is really clear on these things. And I presume that the reason for the executive session would be, I mean, there are certain limited reasons why, and I presume that it would be discussing litigation where to do so in public would have a detrimental effect on the.
Well, that, and also the meetings we've had with SBPF and the selectmen have been,
Executive session.
yeah, they've been effectively executive session, or they've been not open to the public, and we will be discussing some things that the selectmen have talked about and things like that, which if they wanted it to be public, that should be their business to bring that public, not ours, I think.
Well, again, you just, to go into executive session, the actual motion would be to make a motion to enter executive session to discuss pending litigation, whereas discussing it in public would potentially damage your position within that litigation.
Which is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to be clear on, because I'm going to vote no on this just because I don't, I'm not convinced that it would damage our position if we discussed it in public. I think that there's kind of a tendency to go into, of all bodies, to go into executive session whenever you can possibly find a reason to. And I just think we'd be fine to discuss it in the open, because well, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second to go into executive session? I think I did.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mike?
No.
No? Andy?
Aye.
David? Aye. Ernie? Aye. Sarah?
Aye.
Ashley? Okay, so we'll go into executive session.
Okay, guys, thanks.
And we should turn off the recording.
Yes, that's the
and,
being
That
recorded.
would be pretty funny.
Just a small select group of
For the select
people.
board.
Internet.
Or are you going to take care of that?
Huh?
No, I'll take care of it.